Good evening, everybody. Please, could we stand for local government prayer and acknowledgement? We acknowledge the traditional custodians of our beautiful lands and our surrounding waters, the Ramangeri and the Ngarrindjeri people. As a community, we recognise and we respect their cultural connection to these lands and waters.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless this council and allow it to be an agent of change to the people of this city and beyond. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the honouring of your name and the welfare of the people whom it serves. Amen.
We gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army and Air Force who made the supreme sacrifice in the preservation of Australia's freedom and democracy. We also proclaim our gratitude to those who return to us.
Please be seated. Welcome everyone. We've got a big gallery today, so welcome to all of you and also to those that are listening at home on the live streaming program. We don't have any apologies or leave of absence for tonight, but I would like to remind all of the elected members of the requirement of disclosure of any material, actual or perceived conflicts. The Local Government Act requires that councillors declare any interest and provide full and accurate details of the relevant interests to the council prior to the consideration of the items on the agenda. So if you can remember that, that would be fabulous. We don't have anything lying on the agenda, or adjourned rather, or lying on the table, so we can move straight to item 5, which is minutes of the previous meeting, held the 22nd of February. Can I have someone move that they are confirmed as true and accurate? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded by Councillor Robertson. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anybody like to speak to them? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. In correspondence back and forth between myself and the CEO, I accept the CEO's comments on my issues around that. I don't believe they are correct. So I won't be voting for them tonight because I don't believe they are correct. As a true and accurate record of decision making within the chamber wasn't recorded appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I might ask the CEO to touch on what those issues were and why she thinks they're correct. You can remember, Victoria?
Point of order.
And what is your point of order?
I believe you're bringing in the CEO into a debate, discussion.
I'm clarifying what issues may be present in the minutes that you're aware of that other elected members may not be aware of, Councillor Kemp.
I believe they are. They're all included in the emails.
I don't accept your point of order.
I move to overturn your point of order.
Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Charles. All those in favour of the point of order? Those against the point of order? I reiterate that that's not carried, and I reiterate my question to the CEO.
Through the Mayor, just to clarify, Councillor Kemp had some concerns with regards to the recording of questions without notice, that they weren't recorded in the minutes, that those questions were taken on notice by yourself and not answered at the meeting. And I clarified that unless the questions are actually moved and seconded to be recorded in the minutes, that they're not actually recorded in the minutes at the time, and that's what occurred. But Councillor Kemp would prefer that the actual questions, it's recorded that they were actually taken on notice. It's not a requirement of our meeting procedures that occur.
Thank you,
Mayor Jenkins, I'd like to dispute that explanation. That's what the CEO did say, but my actual point was the fact that a decision was made by the Mayor and that wasn't recorded, and that's what I was disputing, not the fact that the questions about notice is not recorded unless the leave of the committee is sought. So that's what I was debating.
The Mayor doesn't make decisions, Councillor Kemp, the Council do. Is there any further debate on accepting the minutes as confirmed as true and correct? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. We have got 3 deputations, and in relation to the deputations, what I propose is after the deputations, because they all are in relation to the investigator car park at Dunk Beach, that we move to item 19.1, which is Councillor Kemp's motion on notice in relation to that. Do I have an agreement with that, with the rest of the... You put up your hand if you agree with that proposal. Thank you. That's more than 2/3 agreed, so we'll do that. The other thing that I'd also ask of you, I'm aware that we've got a number of people from the CWA in the gallery today that are interested in item 11.1, which is halfway through the agenda in relation to a donation to the CWA. With the approval of the elected members, I'd like to move to that item afterwards, so that the CWA women are able to leave if they so wish. Can you put up your hand if you're happy with that?
Excuse me, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
I might have misunderstood the last one. Are we bringing that 19 point whatever it was forward? Yes. Then I agree with it. Thank you. Same with this one.
Yep. Thank you very much. So we do have 3 deputations. As I said, the first deputation is from Mick Scammell. Are you in the gallery, Mick? If you'd like to come up, and perhaps Councillor Charles, who's close.
If I may, I've transferred it to one of the other 2 who's going to say the same thing as me anyway.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. In that case, we have Angelo Polomenis. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, Mr. Polomenis. Please take a seat there. Councillor Charles will show you how to turn the microphone on. Do you mind, Councillor Charles? Beautiful.
Testing.
Thank you. You have 10 minutes, Angelo, and that includes question time from the other elected members as well.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the council for giving me the opportunity to come and address them today. I've spoken to a number, if not the majority of, if not all the councillors about this. I live at Seagull Avenue, Abra, and I overlook the investigator car park. And can I just start off by saying it came as a huge shock to me when I saw the RVs there, and it was a little bit of a disappointment that as a ratepayer and a resident, there was no consultation process. I went through the report. There seemed to be a significant consultation process with the RV Association. I can't remember the person's name, Constable, I think his name was. So there seemed to be a fair bit of consultation on one side, but nothing with the residents. I would have probably thought it would have been fair once the site was selected that maybe a consultation with the residents should have happened. My concern with that is that it's limited to the hours of 6 p.m. until 9 a.m. And I can tell you, and I've got photos of that they're not used during those hours. They're there significantly earlier and they stay there most of the day. They don't park in the designated area that's set aside. Like I said, I've got numerous photos. They park over 7 or 8 car parks as well. They're not self-contained vehicles as well, which means that they're actually, a lot of them have got photos, well, I shouldn't say got photos, but I know that they're relieving themselves in the dunes. There's a lot of rubbish that's left there. It's a very unsafe environment, and it's just disappointing that it's in a predominantly a residential area that was put into that area. And so basically, it's not been, I don't think it's been monitored by the council. I noticed in the report in today's minutes that they actually make reference that the council's public safety and regulation team have continued to monitor the trial of self-contained RV parking site as part of their daily patrols. Well, I can tell you I'm there most of the time, and they are there at whatever time they are. They hang laundry outside. They're not self-contained vehicles. And to me, it's an unsafe environment. It looks like a slum in a residential area. And very unsafe in my view. My daughter won't go down there now because she feels unsafe. Thank you.
Do any of the elected members have questions? Councillor Littley?
Yes, I'll start the statement. I was somewhat opposed to this site being chosen as the RV park. I would have much preferred to have seen it in between the rivers and in an area that wasn't in a residential area, but in an area that actually benefited our traders with people coming in. That said, I did believe that we needed a trial, and I've certainly voted for this as a trial site. And we needed to do that timely at this point in time. One of the questions I've noticed, and I've had some feedback from other residents in the area that promote the fact that this is a very good site to do, and they've said that it's being well utilised. I've been down there and seen it myself. I'm not sure what the inspection rate is, but one of the main questions is, as residents in that area, have you seen a reduction in the hoon behaviour of vehicles in that area? Because it has been a problem in the past where we've had terrorising in the area. I've had reports from other residents that has subsided because there are people in there overnight, and that is putting people into a space, filling a space, has a security impact.
I've lived there for 3 years, and I actually haven't seen hardly any hoon behaviour there in the 3 years that I've been there, to be honest with you. It's a really good, friendly beach environment. There's a lot of kids that go there, and it's a really good family, beach environment, as I said.
Thank you.
And look, I agree there should be a trial. I just don't think it should be in that one, in that location. I don't think it's working. I think that, tonight it should be put forward that it should be in another area, another trial in another area.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from elected members? Thank you very much, Mr. Polymenis. I appreciate you coming forward and providing your perspective.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Hilditch, and Mr. Hilditch, you're speaking on behalf of Bernard Booth. I understand he's not able to be here tonight. Once again, you have 10 minutes to speak, and if any of the elected members have any questions, then they can ask you.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. Booth is with me tonight. He's asked me to assist him to explain his concerns about the proposal. I'm a planning lawyer, and so he's asked me to come to speak from that perspective. I've been out to Mr. Booth's house, and I've looked at the property, and of course I'm generally familiar with the area. Mr. Booth has owned his house and occupied it for about the last 25 years, and his house, as do a number of others, looks directly out over the car park into the dune system and vegetation, and then the sea beyond it. So the site of the RV park is directly in his line of view. I've been looking at the documents in relation to this matter. All I've been able to find is the 14 December agenda report. I know there was an earlier report in October, and then the agenda report for this meeting. So I'm working on the basis of those documents. And so I understand the council's objective of seeking to become an RV-friendly town, and I can understand that it needs to provide a bare minimum of facilities in consultation with the relevant organisation in order to get there. The question is how to achieve that, and I would commend the council at least for making this a trial over a 6-month period, which I think was a good thing to have done, rather than making a permanent decision in relation to this area. From my perspective, the council has focused on a bylaw, and it's exercised some powers under its bylaw to say, look, campers can park on this, what is a public road, in an organised way. But from my perspective, the reality is the land's in a very sensitive open space zone, and that's an important consideration. And we've all been lumbered now with the new planning and design code and have been getting across that in very recent days. But when you look at that code as it applies to this quite extensive zone along your foreshore, it's meant to be an area of natural and landscaped open space to provide for biodiversity and visual relief from the built environment. So that's what we're dealing with. And looking at it, development in the zone is meant to be limited and unobtrusive, and there is clear direction that it shouldn't spoil the open space character or interrupt views of natural or landscape features. And then the code goes on to talk about and state that potential conflicts between long-term residents like Mr. Booth and short-term tourists should be minimised through suitable siting and design measures. And the point that I come to is that, in my opinion, this involves a change in use of this car park. The car park is intended to be used for the minimal purpose of providing car spaces to allow people to gain access to this natural environment during the day. And it's never been, on my understanding, intended to have any sort of organised or structured use overnight. And that's what's now happening as a result of this situation. And the problem then is the way in which it's been formalised is that signs have been erected and some blue lines have been drawn around the area where the vehicles are meant to park. But the problem with that is that unlike a managed tourist park, there are no boundaries around this facility. People don't know where it starts and stops once they've parked there. And the problem with that, particularly in a sensitive environment, is that the vegetation becomes part of the site. And then the dunes become part of the site. And you've heard from Mr. Polymenius, his observations about people walking into the dunes and relieving themselves. So these sorts of things can be expected to happen in an unmanaged and unstructured environment. And Mr. Booth would say, I read one of the reports where it seemed to be intended that the toilets would remain open 24/7. On my instructions, that hasn't been the case at all, and that won't assist the situation. But the point is that what should have happened here, in my opinion, and others may disagree, but I'm of the view that it's not just a bylaw the council needed to look at, but this requires a development application and a proper assessment against the planning and design code, because it's a new tourist facility in a car park that was never intended and has never been used for that purpose. That assessment will call into consideration all of the environmental considerations under your planning and design code. There will be referral agencies who will assist with their expertise about how this interacts with the vegetation. And it just seems to me there's a clear potential here for harm to happen to this sensitive environment and the dunes if people are going to be walking in there and using it in the way that you've been told. So apart from that, there's the visual impact, which will also be assessed, and that is vans parking, washing hung out, unstructured hours and an unstructured use in a car park, which is really only meant to house cars in an orderly manner during the day. And that's why I suspect some of these concerns are arising. It's better to hear that up front through a process that involves public consultation rather than rolling out the use. And with respect, I can understand the temptation to find a convenient and inexpensive answer to a problem. You should all be doing that because you're responsible for a public budget. But sometimes if you look for the inexpensive and quick solution, which this undoubtedly is, to achieving this status, you end up with problems of the kind that the local residents are encountering. So Mr. Booth would ask you please to have regard to that, and before thinking about turning this into any more than it's already been, to put the brakes on and consider more broadly the impact that this is having on the residents and the local environment, because there's no doubt it's a sensitive use in a sensitive area and it ought to be approached in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Hilditch. Do any of the elected members have any questions? Councillor Glasbrook.
This is a question for the administration. Can you please clarify, have the toilets been left unlocked 24 hours a day?
It was my understanding, yes, they were, but the idea was that they were supposed to be self-contained RVs as well. That hasn't always been the case, we're aware, but my understanding is the toilets were unlocked.
That's your understanding as well. Councillor Littling.
Yes, notwithstanding some of, I couldn't agree with some of those things. This is a bitumen car park, they're not permanent structures, but you're learned and you know that very well, so I'm quite sure that you could point to those things. Once again, I'll state, this wasn't my preferred location, and this is a trial, which you've kindly pointed out there, that it's a trial for us to get an assessment of what the demand is for such a site. I can say, having spoken to a number of people down there, they're absolutely rapt to be coming in, and they're coming in from as far afield as Mosman in Sydney and the likes of that. And it's great to actually have that kind of traveller coming through. Again, I understand that that kind of traveller isn't the only kind of traveller that we're getting into that site. It is a trial once again. anyone in the group tell me, is there any evidence of the fact that there wasn't already bush toileting in this facility? Because I've grown up on this beach and I know for a fact that there has always been an issue in that area along that whole railway line precinct, that it's an area that people come up from the beach, not necessarily from the car park. It's an area where groups of youths hang out in different patches. I'm not sure that youths do exactly the same as what we used to as kids, but is there any evidence that this wasn't already happening? Sure, it might have increased, and I can accept that.
Well, look, all I would say to that is that is an activity that's to be discouraged, particularly in a sensitive open space and natural zone like this, which really is an area to be protected. And there's nothing about this use, to me, which discourages that sort of activity. It's only likely to lead to it, and I think that's the concern. But I'm certainly not going to say it never happened before, but I can't see how this would help the problem if it is a problem.
Thank you. Councillor Charles, I will have you have the last question because we are out of time.
Well, so far I haven't heard many questions. I've heard a lot of statements being made. So I'll make another one. Council is being pushed into this by the CMCA, and they feel the need to put them somehow, or rather in the dress circle of Victor Harbour. They'd put them right beside the Hotel Victor if they could, in the main street. But that's just not possible because of the topography that we've got here. The situation is that I don't think you'll find a town or a city anywhere in Australia that's putting people in such a position. Yes, they're giving them facilities, and some of them are charging $10 a night and so on. We have other options, but they're not being explored as yet. And I didn't vote for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hilditch. I appreciate you coming down and speaking on behalf of Mr. Booth.
Thanks again for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Yes, Victoria might just mention a petition that we've just received before we turn to item 19.1.
For the benefit of members, at 3 p.m. today, we did receive a petition in regards to the same matter. Although it has missed the agenda deadline, I am required to advise you, normally as a matter of urgency, that we received a petition from a Mr. Adam Foote, and basically the main signatory of the petition, and that's to cease the camping trial in the Investigator car park. It's got 35 signatories on there. The time that I received it, which was only at 5 p.m. today, I haven't had a chance to check through as whether it's a compliant petition or not. It does appear that way, but you won't actually be receiving and noting it until your April meeting, but I am raising it to your attention tonight.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Robertson, you've got a question?
Yes. Sorry, a clarification for the CEO. What did you say that the petition said? To continue with the...
To cease the camping trial in
cease?
Yes, in the Investigator car park.
Sorry. Yep.
Complete opposite.
Yep. All right, if you turn to item 19.1, which is on page 297 of your agenda, motion on notice, rescission of motion for self-contained RV camping at Dump Beach. Councillor Kemp. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the motion on notice. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Robertson. And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hales. Either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the motion? Anyone want to speak to receiving and noting the motion? It's only on receiving it, Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I realise that, Mayor Jenkins. I just want a clarification. I had no response back from the CEO that I have to amend it or change into two motions now, not just one.
Through the Mayor, yes, we did receive that, and I have that prepared if that's the way you intend to go.
Thank you.
I'll put that first recommendation to the floor. All those in favour of receiving and noting? That's carried, thank you. Councillor Kemp, would you like to propose your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I move that the council move to rescind motion 07142020. The motion that was endorsed was the council endorse a trial period of 6 months for the following designated area and continue for self-contained RV overnight camping, and a report be provided to the council on the trial at completion. The site being the Dump Beach car park at First Street, Hayborough. My motion is a rescission motion to reverse that, so the trial does cease.
Thank you, councillor Kemp.
I'll talk to it in a minute if you want to get a
I'll
second.
get a seconder first. Does somebody want to second that? Councillor Charles? Want to speak to your motion, councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'm not against RV Park or becoming an RV friendly town, but I believe this location isn't appropriate, and any public car park is not the correct site for the reasons that's cited from me as emails from the community and deputations tonight. In the discussions at the December 2020 meeting, it was stated that the location is the wrong site due to its locality to residents, the lack of policing and against bad practices. Non-self-contained RV occupiers will use the dunes and as bush toilets, potential for fires on the beach, potential lack of control to contain rubbish. And that was all mentioned up that could be possibly would happen if we run this trial in that location. I think we done our community an injustice as a chamber because we rushed into this thinking about the RV dollar that will come to town and make this an RV beautiful place to come to. But we failed to consult with our residents who will be affected by this. And I think we have failed them badly. And I think we need to reverse this decision to ensure that this doesn't continue. We still can do another trial at another place, but I think it's the wrong location. And even though there's been lots of emails and photos sent around for elected members that have viewed, as some members said tonight, there have people who have been in favour of it. But generally speaking, there's been most negative reports coming back from the residents, petitions now, as we've heard tonight. So I think we need to do this in the right context. In future, we need to consult with our community who are going to be affected by these types of decisions. And we never considered it. And I failed myself in that respect, that even though it may have been mentioned about what about the residents, we never addressed that issue. And so I think we need to reverse this again. The point is that, you know, without going through a whole detail of all the different key issues, which I did type out, and I thought, no, I think the elected members are quite aware of all the negativity about this trial and how bad it's been managed, because is it being policed? According to our people saying, no, it's not being policed. There's a lot of issues around all this, and it's just not the right place. You know, you don't put these types of facilities in there. And one of the most interesting things about trials, if a trial becomes very successful, they tend to become permanent. And that's not the way we should be doing this. Because how are we going to argue against a successful trial if it was really great? You know, I think that's a risk I don't want to take, that it may come permanent there because it's so fantastic. And there are the issues around competitive neutrality. I know it's a very slim area there to be discussing about competitive neutrality, about competing against the beachfront caravan park by having free overnight stays here, where really in reality, you know, that's what the beachfront caravan park has, is beachfront accessibility, but people pay to go there. Here we allow people to stay overnight for free and have access to that same area. To me, that is breaching on the line of competitive neutrality because there's no charges being done or any facility. People say, well, facilities, yes, well, you know, the toilets were locked, now they're unlocked. But it was about controlling that space by RB, and it hasn't been controlled because there's so much evidence out there stating that anyone can go there and do what they want to do. Even to a point where, you know, teenagers have overheard now they could go camping down there on the weekends, you know, because before they couldn't. So again, is it a dry zone? That's another thing that was raised. You know, there's drinking down there, that type of thing. So it really wasn't a very good decision by this council to go through that process of appointing to that car park. I don't think any car park is the right place. So I would urge the members to consider that this is not the right place. We made a bad decision. We've got to be brave enough to say, yes, we stuffed it up, let's make it right, because our residents have been affected, no one else. And I think we should put our residents before visitors to this town. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Kemp. Councillor Charles, do you want to speak to the motion?
I think he's covered it brilliantly. Thank you, councillor Kemp. We were provided with a series of videos which were on YouTube by a person who's been encouraging us to have this RV overnight park for a long, long time. And one of those videos, and we first of all reviewed them, it was easy to do on the computer. So we had YouTube and we had Maryborough in Queensland. And that Maryborough one really struck a note with me, because a soccer club, a small soccer club, have been given some land near the airport. We've got an airport here, let's put them out there, but that sounds a bit ridiculous. But this airport, I've also got onto another video which showed me the airport and a ultralight flying guy showing us all around the town from the airport. So you can go up and you can see this presentation by this chap who's really just discussing ultralights, and you can see that this location is way out of Maryborough. Mind you, it is on a major highway. And so in 14 months, they've been able to get a $10 per person that parks there, and they have the Maryborough Soccer Club manager go and collect the payments from people. And they have raised $25,000 for the soccer club. Now, as you know, I've mentioned a location down here, which would be ideal and great for a particular school and would be near facilities. I can't see why we're not negotiating that immediately, because that would give that particular enterprise an incredible income over time. It's probably not $25,000 in 14 months because it's not a high Pacific highway. But if we keep it open and available and with some facilities and a fence around it, it could be absolutely magnificent and assist in putting back the environment on this wetlands. Anyway, perhaps I haven't spoken very clearly. I wasn't expecting to, but I think you've got the picture.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Does anybody else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Littley?
Yep, I'll be supporting this motion. As I said, I don't think that the Dump Beach car park, the investigated car park, was the right location in the first place to have a trial. I would much prefer to see a trial or a permanent RV park between the rivers in Victor Harbor. But I'd also like to see an RV park in Victor Harbor somewhere, because the economic benefits of bringing responsible RVs to town are sensational for this area. You can go and speak to these people. They are spending in the town, and it'd be a great way, a great thing to, if we get our ducks in order and we get our site picked out and we have a mutual agreement as an elected body and we work towards it, we will see those benefits for our community. Not just residents who are happy, but businesses who are happy when that winter trade starts coming in more. I'm disappointed that this site at Investigated Car Park will shut down as a trial, because we needed that. We need more than just a few months of trialling this, I think. But I'm also disappointed that it's not police. And I can see the issue from a resident's perspective, as if we're not going to do it properly, we shouldn't be doing it. It was a trial though. How do you rate the success of a trial? We say, you know, if it's successful, everyone's happy with it. If it's successful, it'll go ahead and be a permanent thing. Well, I don't just rate success on did people come and did we bring money into the town. We rate success on if everyone's happy. Not everyone is happy with it. That's clear. So if everyone had been happy with the, you know, no residents had complained, we'd definitely be going ahead with that site there. And would it be the right place? Not in my mind, it wouldn't have been. So I will support this motion, but I do want to see some like-minded thinking. I would like to see some like-minded thinking from the chamber to find that correct location for this facility. I don't think it's out of town. Personally, I don't agree that it's out of town to have the right to have a facility, because I don't think it brings enough of the benefits that we need for the town, enough of the business benefits. But I'll be supporting the motion. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, then Councillor Glasbrook, and then Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also very disappointed that the trial hasn't run its full course, because I think that's the only way to gain the knowledge about what the demand for RVs in our town is. A 6-month period would have been a good length of time to look at that, because that would have introduced more than one season into the picture. So I am disappointed the trial is not running its full course. However, I never thought this was a particularly good site. I would always prefer a greenfield site, and into the future, I hope we can find a greenfield site. Problem is finding a greenfield site within easy location of our businesses in town is not going to be easy. I still think it was worth running this trial, and I hope we can find a suitable site in the future. But I would like to add that, in my opinion, any combination of vehicles that takes up 3 or 4 car parks will definitely be self-contained. So I don't think there's a balance there between saying that these are not self-contained vehicles when they're taking up that much space. I can tell you I've got a car with a self-contained caravan that takes up only 2 car parks. So I think that's stretching the point a little bit. So I'm in favour of this motion, only because it has created some problems. But I hope we do move on and continue with a trial somewhere else, a more suitable site.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Glasbrook.
Yes, well, thank you. I'm extremely pleased that we've been through this process. I was strongly in favour of it, and I tend to agree. I'd like to see to do the 6 months, and it's a little bit of a shame that our residents can't give us that opportunity. But the alternative was to have this across the road from Warnwood Reserve. Do you recall? Imagine having it in the middle of Victor Harbour. You know, this has been a significantly fantastic trial, and I'm so happy because we have learned so much already, and we would have learned more if it could have gone for another 3 months, because as I said at the last meeting, at the December meeting when this was discussed, you know, I have had the opportunity to do quite a bit of touring around in caravan, and I foreshadowed all of these issues that we've been having, and now the whole council has understood it, and I think that's, you know, that's a great result. And I wish we had continued it, because we would have got more feedback, we would have had a better understanding. I don't think anybody ever thought that that would be a long-term solution there. It certainly wasn't my long-term solution. I've been saying for years and years and years that we got that water out on SA Waterland there on the ring road near the horses. It's a nice setting. It's close to the town. It's not right in the town, because I have a different opinion. I don't believe that we should be competing with our caravan parks. I think they need to be a little bit out of town. Grey nomads and people on holidays quite often go out for lunch, because when they get back to the caravan at 4 o'clock, they have a beer or a glass of wine and they don't want to drive anywhere. And that's touring, that's what it's like. And Councillor Charles, you brought up a fantastic example. I've seen it many, many times of sporting clubs, horse, pony clubs, volunteer organisations running these. Most of them were $5. The one you mentioned was $10. It's a fantastic opportunity. Right there next to the SA Waterland, what do we have? We've got a football club, we've got a netball club, we've got a hockey club, and we've got a pony club. Surely one of those groups would be looking to manage one of these types of facilities, and they just go down there at night time, collect the money. If the bin's blown over, they pick the rubbish up and they tidy up. If there's any issues, they report it to the council. It works brilliantly. I'm still strongly in favour of that side. I wish we'd just hurry up and do it. But I think this is a great trial. I will support it. Obviously, it's the feeling of the meeting that they want this trial to end. I would have liked to have seen it go on, because I think, as I said, we would have learnt a lot more, and we're always here to learn, and you know, this is a good result. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook, and I think there's some very good points that you made there, and I can recall conversations going back almost 6 years when we were in the previous council together talking about that site with the SA Waterland as being a good site. Councillor Robertson, you wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Some great points made by fellow councillors. I don't want to repeat them. Safe to say that even if we make a decision tonight to stop the trial, the residents should realise that the trial won't stop overnight. We need to have a plan about how we unstitch the fabric we've created with word of mouth that dump site, or the investigated car park more properly. It's a dreadful word, the dump car site. The investigated car park is actually now closed, and notwithstanding putting signs up there, there'll be people that will come to think that it'll take I would say a month or two to for the place not to be being used. So we as a council need to think about how we back out of that situation. I totally agree that with Councillor Glasbrook and Littley that we should have RV site here in town. I've been also advocating for that for several years, and that it should be out in the Inman Valley. And it's with the development of our trails, it's easy for people to either cycle or walk into the middle of town to enjoy what we have here. So yeah, I look forward to for our continued search for new sites.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I'll just ask the CEO, raising the point that you made, what actually is involved with decommissioning the current site if this rescission motion is to be carried by the chamber.
Yes, through the Mayor. In regards to the decommissioning, we will require to do a government gazettal because we did implement the bylaws in place for allowing that to happen. So given the requirement for a gazettal notice advertising, obviously within the caravan camping world, for those people who may be on their way, removal of signage and line marking, but probably about a 3-week time period for it actually be properly decommissioned.
Can I ask a question? What's the date of the end date of the 6-month trial?
7th of January it commenced, so the 7th of July.
It's about the 7th of July 2021.
Councillor Kemp, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Again, this motion is not about stopping a trial per se, it's stopping the location of the trial. And that's what we've been mindful of. And there's also opportunities to continue to do a trial, to gain the information we need to find out where is the successful place or what are the issues around an RV park, best locations. But this is really about looking after our residential people who were never spoken to, never consulted, asked their opinions, never even considered their feelings, their thoughts, and we just went ahead and did it. I think this may be something for the future to think about next time we decide to put things into our residential areas without consulting with our people. So from that point, I think there's enough been said already. There's a lot of chat about keeping the trial going, the reasons why, and I think it's quite clear that this is not the best location. We as a council need to work towards continue the trial, but find a better location. And hopefully my second motion may put some feet on the ground to look at somewhere we can continue to do this, because I think it's valuable to get this information. But again, it's just the wrong location. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I'll now put your or your motion rather, to rescind motion OC 7/14/2020. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. You did have a second motion there.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. My second motion is that the council to continue the trial at a site more suitable, which will be the information bay where the RV dump point is currently located, or sorry, where the dump point is located. I'll read that again. The council continue the trial at a site more suitable, which will be the information bay where the RV dump point is located.
Councillor Kemp, can I just ask you a couple of questions in relation to that? Yep. So when you say continue the trial, there's 3 months left of the current trial. Are you suggesting that we start a new trial for 6 months or continue the trial for 3 months, ending the current trial?
Oh, look, it's a good question. I thought about continuing the trial, but because we've got only 3 months left, how we go get much out of it. Maybe if I did a variation to continue the trial for another 6 months. So if I put in the council to continue another trial for 6 months.
You got that, Pauline? Do I have a second for that?
I'd like to second that, please.
Councillor Charles. Councillor Kemp, would you like to speak to that?
Could you just read it out again, please, Mayor Jenkins, just to make sure we got it correct?
The council to continue another trial, or they're just getting the wording of that? Continue another trial doesn't make sense. To implement another trial. So council implement another trial for 6 months on a site more suitable, which would be the information bay where the dump point is located. I wonder whether or not the word would, you'd substitute that for could in case the information bay is not suitable being on a Dipty road.
I might be pedantic to go the grammar, but yeah, it could be okay,
Could.
that's fine.
Okay, so that might help you. We've substituted would for could. So the council implement another trial for 6 months at a site more suitable, which could be the information bay where the RV dump point is located. Happy with that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins.
Thank you. Councillor Charles, are you happy with that?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
The only additional thing I would have thought was maybe do some research on it before we instigate it.
There's significant research already being done.
Well, I've seen that, I've read what's been put there, but I'll speak on that later.
Yep. The CEO can answer that as well, but there also may be some private partnership that might want to come in to do it as well. But CEO, if you'd like to respond.
Through the Mayor, if this motion was to be supported, we would need to bring another report back to council what that potential site would be, whether it is that site on the information stand, because that is a dip tie road, it's not council's, and the same requirement for implementation of the bylaws and the appropriate government gazettal notices would need to be researched. So the motion is fine as it is, but it won't be implementing anything as such. It will require another report back to council once it has been allocated and ascertained with the appropriate resolutions around it. Councillor Glassbrook, I might just get the mover and seconder to speak to it so that we don't start the debate before that happens. Councillor Kemp, would you like to speak to us?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Going back in history, if we look at the last term of council under the Economic Development and Tourism Committee, chaired by yourself, Mayor Jenkins, undertook a comprehensive research study to find the suitable location for the RV dump point. I mean, they scoured the whole council area to find the best location. So the committee looked at every possible site, including car parks. Kent Reserve was mentioned, but noted. The Encounter Bay Sports Complex was noted, but again, were not suitable. What they decided on, and which was passed by council, was that the information bay was the best place to put the site for the RV dump point. Now, the RV dump point, I think, would be the logical to a half reasonable person to have an RV car park or parking area there as well, because you've got the dump point for people to dispose of their waste. In the commentary from the administration on this, it talks about a lack of infrastructure to support the RV short-term camping. I'm not quite sure what infrastructure self-contained RVs need. They've got a dump point. I think that's all they need. They've got running water. That's all they need. The lack of manoeuvrability for larger vehicles at the location to its configuration. It can be a bit tight in there, but it's designed also to take these large vehicles so that people can dump their waste. And people who use these vehicles RVs and caravans, they reverse them all over the place, reverse them in car parks and caravan parks and all sorts of places. They can reverse them into areas where they want to be. The location giving high visibility to campers for those travelling on the main arterial road leading to our city. There's 2 points here. One's about the 80k speed limit, but these campers do operate on open roads in rest bays along major highways, and they come together, about 3 or 4 together for security at night. But there can be on a 100k road or 110k road speed limits, and they are visible to the passing traffic. So I see those concerns are very limited. And yes, the consultation required with the Department of Infrastructure and Transport as a landholder, I mean, they weren't too opposed to us having a RV dump point there and an information-based sign, so I wouldn't imagine that would be a bigger problem. But there's also opportunities at that site with the Lutheran Encounter School there now. You could actually look at that and say, well, how would they like to hive off some of their land and put a gate there through the fence and possibility run that and raise some money for their school? Or the Encounter Bay Sporting Complex, or the pony clubs, or the soccer clubs there, the hockey club may want to do that. Vehicles go in and out of space all the time, but at least at the Encounter Bay Sports Club, it does come out in a 60k zone. So it's not a high speed area, and it's close enough to town, but it's also away from residentials. Another site could be the Canton Place. Now that the council has that availability to them, that could be another area for a site. But at the moment, because the RV dump point is located at the information bay, and take on board the points that the CEO's raised before about the whole process of getting that up and running and getting approval, is that why did we put the dump point there in the first place if it wasn't going to be used? Car park or RV park as well. We should have picked the best site to put the RV dump point so that becomes the RV park. But again, it just seems like we didn't quite do it that well. But anyway, the point is, I believe at the moment, to continue the trial, to get the information we need to understand how an RV-friendly town operates with an RV park, and what other facilities do we need to put in place to support the non-RV self-contained vehicles, because there are 700,000 of them around Australia registered. So there is a great market out there to bring them to us. We do have a fantastic city to show off. So at this stage, I think if we can get the approval through and get the do the trial at the and see what the issues are around the information bay, about information gathering.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Charles.
Once again, Councillor Kemp's covered the whole darn thing. All I see when you mentioned the Lutheran school there is a win, 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 win for everybody. A win for the environment. That denuded wetland that needs to be replenished and loved and looked after, the money would be there for that. The money would be there for the basketball stadium and what they are, I don't know if it's confidential or not, but you know, for the facilities that they've been thinking about having there, and to use that to restore it is how I see it. As we see, and I've said before in this council, the trees that have been planted around that roundabout have flourished. They've only been there a short while. It doesn't take long to restore it, and they're not really getting much love at all. So, you know, in 10 years' time, it would just be a wonderful place to take your vehicle in and park. Stay the night, stay for 24 hours, stay for 72 hours, and then go on. That's what most of the parks do. They have a 72 or 3-day stay. That's what's available. Why don't we ask other councils? Why don't we check with other councils what they've done? Look at the success of it all. There's nothing wrong with copying something that's been done somewhere else.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Councillor Glassbrook, you wanted to speak previously, and then Councillor Littley.
Thank you. Yeah, I won't be supporting this motion. Firstly, I won't be supporting another trial. We've had a trial. Unfortunately, it was called short, but we've had a trial and we've learned a lot. For us to be putting up on all these internet sites and whatever else that you can camp here and you can camp there and you can camp somewhere else next week is going to make us look a little bit stupid, in my opinion. Yes, the dump point is there. I was never in favour of putting it there personally. Many years ago, I contacted SA Water and discovered that they could put a dump point down in the SA Water land there. So I'm going to harp back on about that. I think we need to make a decision. Councillor Charles is 100% right. This is happening all over the country. What do we need another trial for? What do we need to? Let's just go and do it. This is not rocket science, honestly. I think we should put it down there. Decide now. Do it once. Do it properly. Put in another dump point. That's what we'll have to do. It's already got trees. It's off the road. There's all of those sporting groups up the road that hopefully someone will be interested in working in with council. So it will be a net zero cost, hopefully. I think we should at least seriously consider it before we go rushing around having another trial. So I'll just vote against it. I'm not in favour of any more trials. I think we need to make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Littley.
Yeah, Councillor Glasbrook said earlier, can you imagine an RV park in the town centre? Well, that's what I advocated for. So yes, I can imagine one in the town centre. And I advocated for the use of the foreshore tennis courts there, the court at the very end, for the very reasons that we wouldn't have had residents here, because there are no residents around that area. Sure, there's some apartments way across the other way, but not sitting in that area. It is a business type area. And I would have loved to have seen a trial done down there on those barely used tennis courts at the very end there. But that's not to be, and our trial has been shortened. That's fine. Would I support this? There has been some comment from some RV people that they didn't know where the dump point was because it's not advertised, and perhaps this is a good area for it. And the extension that is the road that runs up there, which is the old Victor Harbour Road, could be utilised as such for parking. I bring from our residents who presented today the ideas of not feeling safe. We do have a school there, and if our residents on Seagull Avenue and the lights around the Investigator car park felt that their children weren't safe and their children didn't feel safe, how will those students making their way in and around that space, around Strawberry Hill there, how will they feel? Will it be policed? Will they not bush toilet in the new school grounds? These are all things that would need to be considered as well. So I'd hope that if it does, and I will support a use of that area, call it a trial or whatever. I do support what Councillor Glasbrook says. So if you wanted to go that way, I would support that, to set up a permanent facility and get on with this and put it in place. Canton Place isn't my favoured area, but we do need to act. The reason I brought this to the floor to start with was because we have an opportunity to seize on the tourists that are travelling in our own area, and they're coming in their droves, and we need to get, that's why it was put forward straight away, so we could do a trial and get the most benefit out of it. So yes, I would support that. I'd probably prefer to see it somewhere around our school oval over here, Victor Harbour oval over here, and have the Victor Harbour Football Club or our public school monitoring that kind of thing. There's no reason why we couldn't do it there either. But I'll support, I'd support you, Councillor Glasbrook, on moving ahead with this. So I'll see how it goes when other people have spoken.
Thank you. Councillor Schofield, then Councillor Henderson, and then Councillor Robertson.
I won't be supporting this motion as it is, and I foreshadow that I'll put up another motion. I guess one of the things, as an elected member in the past council, I'm extremely disappointed that we have spent 6 years looking at this, and for us to go, it's going to cost us some money, and for us to rescind this motion, I don't believe that that is the way that we should be going.
Sorry, Councillor Schofield, we have already rescinded the
We've
motion.
Rescinded it. Yeah, I know.
We're now looking at a second recommendation.
The second recommendation, I thought we was actually speaking on that the council moved the rescinded motion.
No.
So we've had a mover and a seconder.
The motion has been rescinded. The current recommendation is that council implement another trial for 6 months at a site more suitable.
Okay.
Which could be the information bay where the RV dump point is currently
My
located.
apologies to the chamber, but I will not be supporting it. We've wasted 6 years. It's going to cost us money now, and to start again with another trial is just going back over history. What are we going to spend another 6 years? This was put up to support our business people with the impact of COVID and hopefully create a few jobs in the city. So I understand where the residents are coming from, and yes, we didn't do the right thing in that area, but to start again, I think we're wasting everybody's time.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Similarly, I'll not be supporting this motion. I don't believe this is a suitable site. It may be a good site for a dump point, but it's certainly not a suitable site for overnight stays. And I'd just like to add that I agree with everything Councillor Glasbrook said, and Councillor Charles also said there's plenty of information out there. It's time to move on. I hope we'll bring this back to a workshop and come to a suitable decision on that. But I can't support this alternative site to continue a trial. I just don't think it's at all suitable for our overnight stays, and I won't be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be supporting this motion because I think there are still issues to be learnt by us about the nature of the facilities we provide in this city to make it an RV-friendly town. And one of those is that we are going to need multiple sites. What's previously been talked about how we might impact on the caravan parks in our town. Our caravan parks are increasingly being turned into low-cost housing sites, and the room for caravans, conventional caravans as well as RVs, is extremely limited. So this site here has been one that we have already spent $20,000, I think it costs us to put in that dump site. We do need to advertise it more. It will be very useful for certain types of RV parking. There'll be those people that are making a journey on to other locations, but passing by the roundabout on the way to Cape Jervis or Adelaide, and there's a place for them to come use the dump site and stay the night in that area freely, and then move on the next day. That's one group of people. I totally agree with the other issue that we should move on. I've been really saddened to see us just forever ploughing this field about where an RV park should be, but I reckon there'll be several of them. And as we find locations that have got the facilities, we should be ready to use them. To me, there might be places we could find in the middle of town. Our staff from the council put a lot of effort last December, or in the month or two before December, looking at a whole range of issues to allow for RV parking overnight in the inner city area, and we threw that work out the window. But to me, the ideal site is the area, around the Inman River, and for reasons I can't go into here, but we might find our decision making a little bit easier in another 6 months' time with regard to that. But keep the RV people coming here. We can have a readily turning the information-based site into an alternative to the Encounter car park, and it's a good space. There's plenty of parking space there, and we can continue to find out what happens with regard to RVs. And it's not so much the parking issues; it's more about what they find about Victor that they like, whether they stay 12 hours, 24, 36, 48. And we haven't got into that area at all yet. So we need to attract people to come in, park, and then it's up to us to make advantage of their presence here to find out what it is that they like or don't like, or what we can improve about our town. So I will be supporting this as a trial area if it turns out to be a good trial. And we know that a certain class of RVs find it very convenient. Excellent. Continue on with that. but we will need other places, and I hope that we are able to move on. I think that, to me, the logical one is in the Inman, or various locations within the Inman Valley, and I'm sure that we'll have an easier decision tree to climb up in relation to that in maybe another 6 months or so.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Kemp, do you want to close debate?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. How do we measure a trial?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Did you want to say something, Councillor? Yes, sorry, I missed Councillor Hale's hands. We were talking about the upright computers, which stop you from seeing. I didn't see your hand. Councillor Hales, and then I'll go back to you, Councillor Kemp.
Sorry to intrude, Councillor Kemp. I'll keep it short. I also won't be supporting this motion. I think, as Councillor Glass put quite well, we've had a trial. There's no point trialling another site. If we want an RV parking site, the next one we try should be the one we intend to continue with, because otherwise we'll end up with these unofficial RV parking sites all over town from our trials that are no longer the official RV parking site. But that doesn't stop people once it's on the internet once. It will always have some remnant of this type of activity, which may become a policing nightmare for our officers. So I can't support this motion. I'm just glad that when we did decide upon this site as the trial, we went with one site, not 3 sites, because imagine this level of feedback times 3, which I'm sure, despite what other elected members feel, the other sites would have elicited just as much feedback as this site, because of the nature of the activity. So I'm glad that we have resolved to end the trial, and I won't be supporting to start another one.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. As I was saying before, how do you measure a trial? The thing is that when we started this trial at the Dunns Beach car park, Investigator car park, I didn't personally see, and I can't recall seeing, a measurement protocol on what we're going to measure, what data we're going to collect, how we're going to analyse it to see what the benefits are or not the benefits. We don't even develop that. So we're running a trial, but we have no criteria as to what we're measuring. This is an opportunity. Yes, there's a lot of information out there. You can Google it, you look at all sites throughout Australia, but what's unique about those sites are they're individual. Not one is the same. We need to do a trial, continue the trial to collect the right data, to measure the right for our town, for our location, which is unique. If we don't get that data, what is the best site? How do we look after the RV community if we don't know what they want and how they want it, apart from they want free camping? That's the only thing I know, that when they come here, and they may want 1 or 2 nights of free camping. My understanding is that as long as they get it, they're quite happy to put up where they are, because that's what the whole experience of RV or camping is about, moving from town to town, sightseeing Australia. So for us to get it right, to pick the right location, we need to have the data sets. We don't have that. We can't go off other people's trials and data sets because it may not fit us. So we need to have our own unique data sets. And the only way we can do that is through a trial where you can measure it. And then how do we measure success? How do we measure failure? Those documents I have not seen. And then we need those documents before you make a decision about a trial. So again, you were saying we gathered all this fantastic information already in 3 months. I'm not quite sure what we gathered, apart from discontent from the ratepayers. Some campers loved it because they can go to the beach, have a campfire, have some drinks, whatever. I mean, is that what we're really looking for? Or are we looking for the right facilities, the right location, easy of access to the community, easy access to the travellers coming around to Australia? So that's what the trial's about. The location at the moment is only because I selected the information base, because of the dump point. It's easy for the RV people to get rid of their waste without having to pick up and move. Now, if that comes out, it's not the best location, etc., fine. But in the meantime, while that trial is running, we can still be investigating other locations and looking at those issues. So sometimes you do have to continue with trials if you don't get the right data sets. to stop a trial and not get the data sets, that's really is flying in the face of proper research and making poor decisions. To make better decisions, you need the information. And I don't think we have the information for our town, for our locality. And that's why we need to do this trial, continue the trial to gather that information. Because if not, we'll be here, as another councillor said, another 6 months discussing it because we don't have the information. It's an opportunity. Continue the trial at that location and see what comes out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I'll now put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's lost, thank you.
I have a division, please, Mayor.
All those in favour? Councillor Littley? Councillor Charles? Sorry, where's Pauline? No, that's all right, I'll just wait for Pauline to be ready. So 4. Councillor Kemp and Councillor Robertson. Against is Councillor Mann, Councillor Hales, Councillor Glasbrook, Schofield, Councillor Henderson. That motion is lost. Councillor Glasbrook, you have a question?
No, I'd like to move an alternative motion if I could, please.
Sure, I'll just wait for Pauline to catch up. Yep. And your alternative motion,
well, it's just along the lines I'd like council to consider the possibility of an RV site at the either the Canton Place land or the SA Waterland, or however you want to word it.
The council consider the possibility of an RV site at the SA Water / Canton Place land?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Now, would we need to do that through a, well, I'd like us just to all go down there, have a look, and then have a briefing, have a discussion.
Yeah, I'll wait for you to talk on that. I'll just see if you've got a seconder for that motion. Councillor.
Thank you.
So Councillor Little is seconding that. Councillor Glasbrook and Councillor Littley, would you consider changing that word consider to investigate? You're happy for investigate? That council investigate the possibility rather than consider?
That's fine.
Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Glasbrook?
Oh, look, not really. I think it's just exactly what the wording is. Investigate, have a look at it, just think about it. It's no commitment. But I think there is a potential there. I don't think we've ever seriously looked at it, and I would just like to do that. So if it doesn't work out, well, that's fine. At least we've gone through that process and had a look.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Littley, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think that it is definitely worth investigating, and also investigating the other factors that play around that as well, as far as the horse tram, the horse holdings, clubs around there. I know we're close there to the men's shed and the like. There's a lot of options there, although I don't feel that it is the most appropriate place to have, or sorry, the most effective place to have an RV park as far as the impact and the benefits it has for businesses, but I feel that we do need to have one. I don't believe that I don't believe we quite get there with the trial at the information site, and the reason being that is because I share those similar feelings that if we do start to set trials up everywhere, we're going to make a rod for our own back, and then no one will like RV campers, and we would have absolutely destroyed that that sense of welcoming of RV campers to our town. That wouldn't be very beneficial at all. So I'd like to see this site investigated properly and promptly, quickly. We need to act quick.
Absolutely. Does anybody else want to speak to that? Councillor Schofield?
I guess it comes as no surprise that I won't be supporting that. I wonder if our CEO could actually explain the lease for that land that the Horse Tram Authority has. So as far as I'm aware as a board member on the Victor Harbor Horse Tram Authority, we have a lease over that land for 5 years. So I'd like to know, get an understanding of that. But also one of the big issues that going into Canton Place, it's on a slight bend, it's 100k an hour zone. So if you're going to look at something like that, wouldn't you, and in also considering the building and that is being put in place by the Horse Tram Authority on that land, I think you need to have they've got planning and that in place at the moment with council. So they need to be considered. But the other thing is, wouldn't the Gillespie land be more suitable? The Gillespie land is where you're looking at putting the rest of the sporting facilities. The access to that land is on a 60k zone. It's a safer option. It's flatter land. It's an easy walk along the river into Victor Harbor, and it is more easily accessible to your sporting clubs if they want to pick up the money. The other thing I'm thinking of, well, why give it to anyone else? Why don't I put to the board that the Tram Authority actually run it and take the money? But really, I think your best option and your safest option for everybody concerned is the Gillespie land, given issues and that have arisen in the past. But I would like confirmation on the lease of that land, please.
I'll ask the CEO for that. I'm also extremely conscious of time, and that we've spent, quite a long time discussing this where it can be discussed at a workshop. And I'm also aware that the previous motion talked about investigating different sites. So I will let this motion go through and be debated, but please be conscious of time, and I won't take any other motions without notice on this particular issue tonight after this. So I'll just hand over to the CEO, who may be able to briefly answer your questions. Councillor Schofield.
In answer to your questions, yes, there is a lease on portions of the land on Canton Place, not of all the land along Canton Place. If you recall, there are a couple of other portions as well, but that's what the investigation would obviously articulate and clarify for all elected members.
Thank you. Councillor Charles, and then Councillor Kemp.
I'm wondering whether Councillor Glasbrook is interested in putting this investigation on a number of locations. For me, we're really just trying to run this whole thing, with ideas on the run, thoughts on the run. It's really not working out at all. But, why should we just look at one location when there are others? I've expressed one. We've got 20 acres out there with the Lutheran school, and I'm sure they'd be very interested in doing it. It's an environmental thing. It makes sense. It's an excellent location.
Councillor Charles, if we start talking about
But-
20 odd locations tonight, we're
No,
not
I
going
don't
to leave
suggest we
this.
should, but I think we just need to broaden up the motion that just isn't Canton Place. There are others.
Yeah,
I don't know how you're
I'll
going to
withdraw the motion.
Thank you,
Just so we can
Councillor
move on.
Glasbrook
This is
withdraws the
have a
motion.
workshop then.
And that is the end of that. So we now move on to the item 11.1, so that the CWA representatives in the gallery can leave if they like to.
Sorry, Your Worship, I just had a question on that motion. And I'm reading here, if recommend 2 is resolved, then we need to allocate a further 8,000 in our budget line for the purpose of terminating the trial.
Sorry, Councillor Schofield, we've finished with all of that.
The motion was split into 2, so the resolutions that came from the floor was that the trial was rescinded.
Yep.
And
so we don't need the $8,000 in budget to
No.
terminate what we've got at the moment?
no,
Okay.
that was actually about instigating another trial area if another trial area was allocated.
Okay.
And Councillor Glasbrook withdrew his motion, so that's completely finished with. We now move to item 11.1, donation request Country Women's Association. The recommendation number 1 is that council receive and note the donation request. Would someone like to move that way, please? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconding that is Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Receiving and noting the request? Anyone want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. And does somebody want to move either option 1 or option 2? Councillor Henderson?
I'd like to move option 1,
You'd like to move option
but
1?
I do have a couple of questions too. Thank you.
Option 1. Let's just see if we've got a seconder for option 1, and then if we do, then you can ask the questions when you speak to it. Councillor Robertson, you're seconding option 1?
Yes, I'd like to just ask a question.
Yep, I'll just wait till Councillor Henderson's asked her questions and spoken. Councillor Henderson, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. I am in favour of this, but I do have a couple of questions which I'd like to back up my support for this motion. First question is there a precedent in giving financial support retrospectively for building maintenance? And the second question is, do we always take into account the funds held by an organisation before we make a decision on such things?
Kelly, could you respond to that?
Thank you, through the Mayor. In terms of retrospective payments, it is against the donations policy, which basically looks at amounts of a smaller amount. So I would not be able to tell you exactly if we have provided that retrospectively in terms of a similar donation at this point in time. However, anything that doesn't meet current policy comes to council for the decision, so it is possible. The other question, could you just remind me again?
Do we always take into account the funds that an organisation has before we make a decision?
Yes, the donations policy actually sets out that any donation given, the organisation that's requesting it needs to demonstrate that they require it to do the activity. And so that's why it has been taken into consideration within the report, that the funds, the group did have the funds available to undertake the works and did so at the point in time. But again, it comes to council because you are able to make a decision outside of your policy.
Is that all, Councillor Henderson?
That's all for now. Can I still speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'm asking you
at this point. Yes, I will speak to it now then. I don't think it needs to be said that the CWA does a lot of community work, and it seems to me from reading the information here that this was something that came upon them quite suddenly, and it was unexpected. And even though they may have funds to have, and they did have funds to accommodate this cost when it came to them out of the blue, so to speak, they may very well have already had those funds earmarked for some of the work they wanted to do. And so that's why I'm suggesting we give them the support, because we know that, you know, the funds they raise, that they're not easily raised, and they are very often destined to be put back.
Somebody's got the phone that's going, that's disturbing. Can you please turn it off? Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Henderson.
Often these funds are already sort of earmarked for the works that some of these community organisations plan to do, and so that's the basis for my support and for putting forward this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Robertson as seconder, would you like to speak to this?
No, not yet, Mayor, but I did want to provide an amendment to this, if I could, to replace two.
Would you like to do a variation?
Yeah.
You can do a variation if Councillor Henderson agrees to it, otherwise you can put a formal amendment forward.
Yeah, I'd like to make the, to replace the $2,000 with $9,000.
Councillor Henderson?
No, I'm not in favour of that. I'm happy with the original 2,000.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robertson, did you want to do a formal amendment?
Yep.
Do you have a seconder for that? You can't? Oh, you can't do it because you've seconded this motion.
Yeah, well, there's an offer of 6,000 here.
Are you going to 9,000, 2,000 or 6,000, Councillor Robertson? Somebody talked earlier about making decisions on the run, and I think that especially if we're looking outside of our policy, our decisions have to be very well thought out, as much as we would like to be able to provide them. So that variation has not been accepted. You are the seconder. Somebody, if this is lost, may foreshadow an alternative motion. Is that what you're doing, Councillor Charles?
No, Mayor, I was going to support the 9 and see where it goes.
Well, Councillor Robertson can't amend a motion that he's seconder for.
I see.
So you can foreshadow a motion that if this is lost, you're going to ask for 9?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so Councillor Robertson, do you want to speak to your motion?
If the motion for 2,000 is lost, you're going to say?
Yes.
Then foreshadow 9. What's the likelihood of that happening? That doesn't seem to make much sense.
Sorry, Councillor Robertson.
I'd like to speak to it, but I can't as yet, can I?
No, you can't just yet. Councillor Robertson, would you like to speak to it as the seconder?
Yes.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. I think for a whole bunch of reasons, we have let down this institution in the way in which this whole issue has come about, the way in which it was dealt with. I think when it comes to the fabric of our society in Victor, a major part of that is these institutions like the CWA, like the sporting clubs that we spend so much time looking after, like other service clubs, like other institutions that have a long and storied history in our city. And this issue came about because during the construction of the state government funded Torrens Crozier roundabout, a tradie suggested that the overhangs on the faux Art Deco exterior of the CWA building were about to fall off the wall. And so it was then the CWA was presented with this bill. This was going to cost them $12,000. And so they did what decent people do, and they went ahead and paid for it to be done. We as a council need to be understanding of how much sweat and effort goes into what our local institutions have to go through to raise $12,000. And to put it in perspective, yes, the CWA at the time, I don't think I'm out of turn in saying this, but they had a bank balance of 17,000. Whoa, you might say they've got lots of money. They can afford to pay for this, the concerns of this tradie, that, you know, the parapets might drop off the building that have been there for 90 odd years. And so let's just give them the bill and let them pay it. Well, to me, you know, we ought to take a bit more care over our institutions, these parts of their society, the fabric that make up our society. Because what you do essentially by forcing them to pay for the concerns of a tradie, and by the way, they had an engineering assessment done which said the parapets were not about to fall off the building and therefore fall on the head of this tradie, that this would clean out their bank account. So this would put their activities and a lot of what they do in jeopardy, could bankrupt them, take it down to such a low level that they're not able to do what they want to do. You know, this can cause little local institutions to fall over and decide that well, it's not worthwhile going on because we've had to pay this cost. Where were we when it came to the issue of moving in to say that, right, this, you know, this parapet's not about to fall off the wall of this place, that can we not find an arrangement with the contractor who's doing the roundabout there, which I think cost us, or cost the state government $1.something million, that if they really felt that the parapets were about to fall off the walls after being up there for 90 years, that why should the CWA as owners of their own building, a little bit different to a lot of our local institutions that get a lease off the council to have their club rooms or whatever situated locally, that could we step in and say that, look, this kind of money is going to really severely impact on this institution. Don't we have a perspective about helping our local society to keep going, especially in these times when it's really difficult to keep going? And to me, this is a good salutary lesson to us. Get to know your institutions locally. Be prepared to step in as a duty of care to your local institutions, not to bankrupt them because some tradie says that something's going to fall off a wall, but really to be able to step in. They did the right thing because they're the sort of people that do the right thing. They got presented with this bill and they paid it. So now their coffers are down to next to nothing. So, you know, to me, we should have gone about this differently. We should have been ready to step in and act as brokers to people who have no capability, and that's not a reflection of their intelligence or anything, but no capability to deal with these issues that come at them in terms of having bills presented. And what decent people do is pay their bills on time and then just to suck it up and go back to the beginning. It takes years, decades to get where they got to with the money they had in the bank, and then to see most of it just being stripped away because, you know, some tradie said that something was about to fall off the wall.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson.
So to me, Mayor, I think that what we should do, to me it's insulting to have a donation of $2,000 being provided to the, that means that we are...
Thank you, Councillor Robertson, your time is up. Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Kemp.
I tend to agree with Councillor Robertson. I was going to suggest $6,000 simply because that's more in line with what council would normally do. It's normally tends to be dollar for dollar with our grants and things. So I would be happy to give them a little bit more money, and I thought that would be more in keeping with what we would normally do.
Councillor Kemp.
Just a question, Mayor Jenkins. The report talks about donation of $12,000, and the option talks about $2,000. So
the request from the CWA was $12,000, and the recommendation is for $2,000. because it is retrospective and that's all that's left in the budget. So if you want more than $2,000, then we need to find a different budget line for that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor, question?
Your question, Councillor Robertson?
Yeah, are you sure you're correct? The request from the CWA did not include an amount of money. They just requested help with it.
Who's correct? They've paid $12,000 and they've sought assistance from council. So you're correct in that they haven't asked for $12,000. They've just sought assistance from council. They said they've duly paid $12,000. Councillor Littley?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Kemp, you haven't spoken yet, have you?
No, I just wanted to clarify, you know, the issue around 12,000 compared to the recommendation, that's all. So
yep.
To me, the report seems to be incorrect then. Is that right? No? Okay, I didn't think they asked for 12,000.
No. Just a moment, Councillor Kemp, Councillor Glasbrook, have you spoken?
Yes, thank you.
You have. Councillor Littley?
Along the lines that Councillor Glasbrook has put forward that a potential amount of $6,000. Is there a budget line that we can, you said we'd have to find another budget line, what budget line might we find?
It's not a matter of finding another budget line, you'd need to increase this budget line by an additional $4,000 if that was the case, because there is only $2,000 left in the donations budget.
And we need to do that through another process?
Another resolution that you increase the budget line by additional $4,000.
So at the moment, we are looking at option 1, which is a donation of $2,000. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate? No? I'll put that motion to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That motion is lost. You foreshadowed another motion, Councillor Glasbrook.
I'd be happy to move the same motion with the figure of $6,000. If someone's happy to second that.
Would you like to speak to that?
Oh,
sorry, would you like someone to second that? Councillor Charles? Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Glasbrook?
Just very quickly, I will. You know, I totally agree. We need to look after our organisations. We've got all the amount of money in the world when it comes to an arts and cultural centre or a car park down on Railway Terrace, or I can list 100 things. And here we're talking about $4,000 for one of our hard-working community groups. You know, let's transfer $4,000 out of the arts and cultural centre budget line. You know, the money well spent as far as I'm concerned.
You, Councillor Charles, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, 83 years the building's been there, and 83 years it's been sound, it's been fine. I see the report here talks about that it needed to be done. I don't know whether our engineer looked at it or what the story was, but it's a paltry amount, $2,000. These people wouldn't ask for help if they, and they didn't. They didn't initially. They just went ahead with it, as Councillor Robertson said. These people should be insulted by 2,000, but so that's why I'm saying 6 is at least a step in the right direction. They were there well before this roundabout.
Councillor Littley and then Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, I'm supporting this. I'll speak to the fact that this kind of donation and actually showing our community groups and important community groups that we are willing to help and we do value their contribution might pave the way to other community groups actually seeking out that help earlier and then perhaps being able to save on some costs as well. And so we can work in situ with community groups and in hand with community groups to overcome things that might have been expensive costs that they didn't need to pay. So I think that this is a way of showing our valued community groups and volunteer groups to put their hand up and ask for help earlier, so we might be able to use our expertise on council to save costs going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Ridley. Councillor Henderson?
Yes, of course I'm going to support this. I would be happy to give them the full 12,000 if we had it in the budget. And the only reason I put forward the motion for the 2 was because that was what it was in the budget. I'm not sure where we're going to find the additional 4,000 from, but I sincerely hope we can find it somewhere because, yes, I think we should give them this amount of money.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Glasbrook, do you want to close the debate? I'll put that to the motion for floor now. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. And I'd like to say congratulations to the CWA. When I look at the decision that council has made, I actually see that $6,000 going back into the community. And I know, as opening your state conference last week, the fabulous work that you do in supporting rural communities and rural families. So thank you very much. We now move back to the beginning of the agenda. And we had one question from the gallery, from Ben Blatchford, and that was refused for the usual reasons, Mr. Blatchford. The CEO has talked about the petition that was received late today, and that will be presented at the next council meeting. So we move now on to item 9.1, outstanding resolutions. And the recommendation is that council receive and note the outstanding resolutions report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales. And seconded by Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I have some questions on the resolutions, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Turning to the page 9, the first page of the resolutions for this year. Just wanted to a couple of questions on the very first one at the top of the page. Do we actually have a formal name for what we are referring to here as the proponent, the Anchorage development proponent? I mean, we various refer to it as this person or this entity as Greg Phillips or the Anchorage. Do we have a name for the Anchorage development proponent? I'm just interested in seeing if we can clear up some of the language here, because to me it should be, we should be referring to a proper entity.
Yeah, through the Mayor, the entity that is the proponent is Greg Phillips. All means one and the same thing.
Greg Phillips, okay. The other one here is that anyway, this oh, that's right, yeah. The previous principal document under review, this one has been updated, and this is the one that has been agreed to or has been signed. I was a little bit confused by the recommendation on the follow-up action. The follow-up action says resolution superseded by a certain number, previous principal document under review following more recent council resolution to engage in the EIO process. Then it says after that complete. So do we have a complete document? A signed one, I guess, means complete.
Through the Mayor, no, we don't have a completed signed document yet. The document that the follow-up action is referring to was the document that came out of the resolution that was made in 2019. But the reality of more recent decisions of council to have a look at that in a different way, which I would add is still held under confidence, has basically superseded that particular component of the resolution in question. So the document continues and the negotiation of the document continues.
Okay, so the follow-up action is not quite complete. It's, as it says there, it's still under negotiation.
Correct, but now it falls, the work now falls under a further resolution that was made by council. So there's not a need to have those both of those resolutions continue to be open, hog up space that isn't needed.
Okay. The fourth one down there, the pre-budget commitment, the capital projects contract position. So it's down there as complete. So that the person or persons, it's the firm, I guess, that recruitment process is completed. We should be hearing or being introduced to that person or persons, I guess, fairly soon.
Through the chair, that recruitment process is complete. It was an elaborate process, and we have appointed a person who has commenced in that position. It wasn't a firm, and we're now backfilling as it was an internal applicant, despite it being an open recruitment process.
Right, okay, thank you. On page 12, the mountain bike trail program there, it's excellent, I think, that this has been done, that we have a community consultation process that's gone out, and in particular that before the elected member workshop, that there'll be well, I guess it's not an on-site visit, but at least it's a community consultation that takes place with the consultants in that, I guess it's essentially Camp Reserve. On the next one, which is about the Warren Reserve turf trial, yes, it's true. The turf trial, in fact, is continuing because the original 2 pieces of donated turf of the latest turf varieties have, I think, well and truly shown what they can do. They're actually, so the trial is continued, and I think it's a huge success for those who want to go down and have a look at it. This is really right down what we're talking about in terms of our environmental management, because the turf trial has shown this is a new turf that requires way less water, way less mowing, way less fertilising, and is tougher than Kikuyu. The second one from the bottom there, this is for the construction of the multi-purpose boat landing facility in Victor Harbour. The finalisation of the full.
Can I please have a point of order here? It was my understanding that we're asking questions to the resolution, but we seem to have a commentary about what's written in the report here, not a question. I haven't heard a question for a couple of points on these subjects for at least 2 or 3 in a row now. It's just a commentary on what's happening rather than a question as to what's on the report in front of us.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Littley. Look, there is a recommendation. It's not a recommendation as such that you debate. It's not sort of making a decision. It is accepting the outstanding resolutions report, and it is an opportunity for people to ask questions. I don't think a formal point of order is warranted, but I do take your point, and I would say to Councillor Robertson please be aware, we, rather than a commentary on all of the issues outlined in the resolution report, if you have any specific questions, please feel free to ask them, but there isn't any need to go on and comment about all of them.
Yeah, I think Councillor Little's got a point. I was commenting rather than questioning. But down to the bottom one on the business case, who is doing this, and will there be a public consultation before this business plan is presented to the council in April?
Through the Mayor, if I may, there was an intention to do a public consultation. We had done a fair bit of public consultation when we did the economic impact assessment that was done last year in regards to the proposed facility. The business plan that was being presented back to council was basically a desktop review of all the reports that have already been done by this council over many, many years, and whether we can fill some of the gaps that haven't been undertaken, like the environmental management studies. We will within budget, but if not, it will basically be a summation of all the reports that have been done in one final business plan for this council as to whether that is the best location and what council actually does need. But there wasn't going to be any public consultation as part of that. I think you've done a fair bit of consultation on that already.
Okay, one more question on that. Do you think it's possible that this work will be finished so that this can be presented in time for the April council?
Possibly not. My intention was hopefully to have it finished by the end of April. To make it to the April meeting, I need to finish by mid-April, which is probably not going to happen.
Okay. Right. Okay. That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, Councillor Charles?
The O'Leary Street retaining wall, has that been, have we spent the whole 120,000, or has that come in short or cheaper than that? I see that it's been done. Is it complete? Looks like it's complete.
Karen? Director Rokoczynski will get back to you on that, Councillor Charles. She's not sure, although it is complete, but the budget she'll need to get back to you on.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? In that case, I'll put the outstanding resolutions recommendation to the chamber. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Victor Harbour Coast Care and Heritage Advisory Group Council Member Representatives. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the report. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconded Councillor Robertson. Either of you want to speak to that report? Councillor Robertson, it's just speaking to the report.
Indeed, Mayor. Yes, there's a whole lot of missing information out of this and some completely erroneous statements. I think this one hasn't been put together very well at all. Part of the problem being that you're trying to get two lots of activities into one recommendation. There are some significant omissions and misstatements in here.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on noting and receiving the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So the first part of the recommendation is relating to Victor Harbour Coast Care Committee, and the council. And the first recommendation is that council receive and note the nomination from Councillor Charles for the one council member representative position on the Coast Care Committee. With that third recommendation is that council appoints Councillor Charles. Are you happy for me to do those two en bloc? Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook moved that way, and second to Councillor Hales. Either of you want to speak to that? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The recommendation 4 is that council receive and note the nomination received from Councillor Charles and Councillor Robertson for the one council membership representative position on the Heritage Advisory Group. So if both of those if both Councillor Charles and Councillor Robertson want to stand for that, then we will allow 3 minutes for each to explain why they should be nominated. And Councillor Glasbrook.
Just a question. I thought there was a chair position and a member position.
There is a chair position and a member positions. There's 2 positions. So what would happen would be if Councillor Charles and Councillor, so you are on the committee, and there'll be another councillor, either Councillor Charles or Councillor Robertson on the committee, and then the 5th recommendation will be Councillor appoint one of those councillors to the position of chairperson. Okay.
I would see it.
Councillor Lilly was the chair and he resigned, and so the chair position was vacant. You are currently a member of the Heritage Advisory Committee. I did receive some correspondence from Councillor Robertson telling me that you were going to step aside and that both of them could actually come onto the committee. I then asked for clarification until I actually had a formal resignation from you that that I could put that in place. And the email I received from you was going, well, if there was interest, you were happy to step aside. So it didn't clarify as a formal resignation to me, hence I've presented what I have, which is a resignation from Councillor Lilly as chair. So that's what the two nominations are looking for at the moment. If you choose to step aside, then I do have 2 vacancies, one of those being chair.
Okay, well, I apologise for not using that word resign. I am happy. I've been on that committee for 6 years. I'm happy if we've got 2 people who are interested in being on there. I think it's good for elected members to get onto some of these committees and have some experience. So I am happy to resign from that committee and allow one of these gentlemen to take my position.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. I'll take that as a formal verbal resignation from that committee. Thank you. Can you follow that up with an email? Thank you. So therefore, both Councillor Charles and Councillor Robertson are eligible to stand on the committee, and we don't need a voting for that. So the recommendation will read that the council appoints Councillor Charles and Councillor Robertson for the 2 council member representative positions on the Heritage Advisory Group. I'm just waiting for Pauline to catch up. Sorry?
We probably need to nominate the chair.
Yeah, I'll do that once,
Yeah, okay,
once
thank
council's put them on, then I'll ask whether or not one or both of them want to be chair. If only one wants to be chair, then the resolution will be to make that person chair. If both of them want to be chair, then we need to go through a voting process. Yep. Okay, so do I have someone to move that way? That council appoint Councillor Charles and Councillor Robertson to the council as council representatives to the position on the Heritage Advisory Group. Councillor Robert Glasbrook, you're moving that way. And a seconder, Councillor Kemp. Either of you want to speak to that?
No, I've already spoken.
Anyone want to speak to that? All those in favour? That's carried. Congratulations, Councillor Charles and Councillor Robertson. We now have a 5th resolution to appoint one of you to the position of chairperson.
Mayor, I'd be happy to just be a committee person, please. Thank you. No, you'd be a better chair. You do more research than I would ever do.
Councillor Robertson, are you happy to be chair?
Yes, Mayor, I was about to do, he got in first, I was about to put him on as chair.
Okay. So the recommendation would stand that council appoint Councillor Robertson to the position of chairperson to the Heritage Advisory Group, commencing 23rd of March and concluding November 2022. Someone move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp, seconded by Councillor Glasbrook. All those in favour? Councillor Robertson, are you voting?
Yeah.
All those, can we do that again? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously, thank you. We now come to 9.3, which is feedback sought on the LGA discussion paper, Council Member Behavioural Management Framework. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the feedback sought report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you. And seconding that, was it your hand up before, Councillor Kemp? Yeah. Yep, Councillor Kemp seconding that. Either of you like to talk to receiving and noting the report? Anyone want to talk to receiving and noting the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. There's option 1 and option 2 there. Councillor Schofield.
I'd like to move option 1, please.
So option 1 is that Council submit the feedback provided at attachment A to the Local Government Association in relation to their discussion paper on Member Behavioural Management Framework. Do I have someone to second that? Councillor Henderson? Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Councillor Henderson?
Well, I'm sure we've all read the information. So this comes from the LGA discussion paper. LG Reform Group identified areas for improvement to make us all more effective, efficient and deliver better outcomes. So of course we need to support this, because don't we all want those things? So I think it's very important that that we give our feedback to make sure that we do help all of local government groups become more effective, efficient and deliver better outcomes. And we all need to be involved in that process. We're a democracy after all.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Are there any more comments? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor. I see the value in the submission, which is on page 26 through 28. But I'm really wondering, you know, where this is going to lead us to. Is this really going to be improving efficiency, etc.? The business that's in here, where the current values and behaviours of what's being, what people are trying to define, all we'll get is more academic definitions of that. To me, it's there's very little in here, even in our own feedback to the LGA, with the kind of language we've used in terms of what should be in this behavioural management framework, or at least what we're trying to massage in the sense of where we're going with this stuff. We already have a framework in place. Sure, it has a whole lot of warts on it, mainly because prescribing human behaviour is extremely difficult stuff. If you want to get right down in the weeds and stuff, then you disappear into academia. And to me, a lot of this is fairly trivial stuff. And I see where we haven't provided feedback in the document. I don't know why we chose to not provide feedback on some things, but where we, where I just pick out an example. I've got notes all over the place here, but on page 26, item 3 there, which is what level of prescription should be in the standards of behaviour. For example, should high-level statements be supported by descriptions and or examples? And our submission from this council is going to be there should be definitions for values or behaviours. To me, this is going to be an academic exercise. Or next item 4, is the level of consistency across the sector important versus the freedom for councils to choose behaviours they expect from their council members? And our submission to the, as it states here, is there should be the same standards of behaviour applied consistently across the sector. Well, what does that mean? So Yeah, we're going through the motions here. To what extent this is going to result in anything different, I really have my doubts, because, you know, I would have preferred us to put in in something where we said we weren't sure about what level of consistency was required, or if it needed to be consistent at all, rather than putting down stuff which is undefinable to me. So, I think it's an exercise in futility, really. When we're getting the level of progress on this as opposed to where we are at present, I just don't see it.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are there any other commentary from other members? Councillor Kemp.
Thanks, Mayor Jenkins. I won't be supporting this on the basic of the grounds that anybody goes into local government as an elected member. I don't believe they're dullards. I think they're quite intelligent people. I think they can work out themselves what is appropriate behaviour. The Act spells out quite clearly, I believe, that on behaviour there is mechanisms in place to control behaviour within the legislation. So again, this is just playing around with semantics and just trying to make it too prescriptive, which really becomes a bit of a headache in this context of it. I think we should rely upon, people's own personal values and integrities on how they behave and perform. And of course, that can be controlled within its own forum. There are some councils that maybe not providing good examples on how local government should operate, but that's them. They need to sort out their mess. It's not us sorting out their mess for them. I think we are all intelligent adults, and I think we should know how to perform and how to behave. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Any further discussion? Councillor Schofield, did you want to close the debate? I'll put that motion to the floor, and that is option 1, that council submit the feedback provided at attachment A. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. We now move to community development, and we're looking at community membership appointments for the Fleurieu Regional Community Services and Southern Community Transport Scheme. These are all community representatives from Yankalilla, Alexandrina Council, and I'll do that recommendation en bloc. Those 4 recommendations. Councillor Robertson?
Yeah, I'll support that.
You're happy to move that?
Yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Henderson. Either of you like to speak to it? Anyone like to speak to it? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. 10.2, the Encounter Sculptural Proposal. And the first recommendation is that Council receive and note the report. Moving that way. Thank you, Councillor Mann, and seconding it, Councillor Robertson. Either of you want to speak to the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The second recommendation is that Council provide in principle support on the condition that the Encounter Celebrations organisation engage with the Narrandjeri Aboriginal Corporation, and that an artistic concept be presented to Council prior to a preferred site being determined and endorsed. Moved by Councillor Henderson and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Henderson?
Just to say that I'm a big supporter of making it known the history of Victor Harbour, and this is one way of doing that. And the more we recognise our history, our joint history with our native Aboriginal people who've been here for a very long time, if we can do that in a satisfactory way for all concerned, I'd be very happy.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to it? Councillor Robertson and then Councillor Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is an effort by, well-meaning group of local people and good luck to them with the processes that they've entered into about being able to find a location and complete their project. Good luck to them. And I have a suggested location, Mayor, for this sculpture. I think
when as it says in recommendation 2.2, the concept be presented to council prior to a preferred site being determined and endorsed, we can talk about that at that council meeting and workshop.
Oh, okay. I thought that, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I think good luck to them.
Thank you, Councillor Charles.
Where do I start? I think, you know, after 220 years, it should be a fairly substantial piece of artwork. And I'm curious as to what the cost might be if that's the case. I read through the Narrandjeri Aboriginal Corporation's letter that was written by Tim Hartman, and I don't really think, I can't fully understand what it is they want, and there's been an assumption that that they're in full favour of the whole thing, which it may be the case, but Rydan and Flinders is one side of the coin, and we already know that by the occupied ground thing display there with those 3 poles there at, in the car park near the Hotels Victor. I don't know, I think this should be really from the perspective of the Aboriginal occupants of the land, and not so much leaning the other way. In recent times, Australia Day and all things similar have become very controversial. I think we need to really clarify what the Aboriginal people want, and this should be purely a serious Aboriginal sculpture.
Charles, as you can see,
in the first instance,
recommendation
yes.
2.1 is that they engage with the Narrandjeri Aboriginal Corporation on the development of their concept.
Mayor, I see that, but this would have a way of getting away from us, that the engagement could all be over and done without a satisfactory result for a lot of Aboriginal people. And I think it's time after 220 years to consider what it would be like for them, and to maybe assist getting the chip off the shoulder from everybody's point of view.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Henderson, did you want to close the debate? I'll put it to the floor, the recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We have item 10.3, the Volunteer Week Small Grants Program. And I will ask the Deputy Mayor to come and chair this item. I have a conflict of interest. I have an actual conflict of interest, as my husband is the captain of Lower Inman Brigade that stand to receive some grant funding.
If I could also join you, because I'm an active member of the same brigade.
And just for the record, I'll let you know that I have resigned from Zontas, so I do not have a conflict of interest. Yes, Councillor Kemp.
Deputy Mayor, I have a perceived conflict of interest as I'm the board member on Kaolingri Board of Management, and also I have some involvement with the Fleurieu FM, so I'll be leaving the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the recommendation is that Council receive and note the Volunteer Week Small Grants Program 2021 report. Thank you, Councillor Little. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hales, thank you. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, I'll put that motion to the floor. All those in favour? That motion's carried, thank you. Recommendation 2, that Council approves the following 20 grant applications for funding under the 2021 Volunteer Week Small Grants Program for a total amount of $1,850. I have a mover, thank you Councillor Henderson and Councillor Littley. Is there any discussion? No discussion, I'll put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? That motion is carried, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. We now move to the next item, which is 10.4, which is an update in relation to the Victor Harbour Cinema. A number of people have been asking how that's going, so this is a recommendation giving you an update. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And someone like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to it? Councillor Schofield?
Yes, look, I just like to say thank you very much for this report. It's can see where COVID has actually affected them, but it's also very interesting to see the plans that they have for the future. So thank you very much.
Councillor Hales? Does anybody else want to speak to the report? Councillor Robertson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Following on from what Councillor Schofield has mentioned, Councillor Kemp and I had the pleasure of going to Adelaide with Director Pathouse and forgotten who the other person was, Louise? Yeah. To look at the two cinemas at stages at the Noarlunga Centre and the Marion Centre, and we caught up to Susan Baldwin at the which one was it? The second one, the Noarlunga Community Centre, and I was very interested to see that she is the person that supervises the person who's managing the cinema, but very much on top of what's happening there. I think it's great that we have that they've sorted out issues in relation to getting the cinema moving on. I'm sure that it will do well, much better than it has. Once the, in fact, I was at the South Coast Environment Centre had a regeneration of agriculture film on last Thursday night. The cinema was packed out. It shows the extent to which there is a real demand locally, both with Fleurieu Film Club groups and so on, to be able to hire the facilities, and but also that we've got some local people that are getting casual work out of the cinema, and that also that there is some training being looked at in the coming up. I was hoping that we would also, what I would like to see out of this process is not just the numbers and the amount of money that is being made, and we'll have a better idea from now on with the vaccinations for COVID and stuff coming on, people going out more. But it would be very good to know the patrons' interests in the sort of films that we could have there. And I also note lastly that in a related area that the Nunga Screen and a couple of the other Arts on Screen programs that Arts SA and and Suzanne is working on also have the potential for us to show those at some of our community halls as well. So I think this is, it's great to get this report from her about what's happening at the cinema.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson, and yes, thank you, Director Pathias, for, whenever I see your name in writing, I get tongue-tied. Thank you very much for a fabulous report, Graham. Does anybody else want to speak to it? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. We have the Council Assessment Panel now for 10.5 independent member appointment. And I will do that recommendation on block unless anybody disagrees with that. Are you happy to move that on block, Councillor Charles?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We have done item 11, which was the donation to the Country Women's Association. So we move to item 12 and 12.1, which is the South Australian Coastal Council's Alliance Governance and Funding Model discussion paper. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the discussion paper report. Someone move that way. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Seconded by Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. The second recommendation is that Council endorse the Chief Executive Officer to provide feedback to the Southern Hills Local Government Association Board, advising of Council's support for the draft South Australian Coastal Council's Alliance Governance and Funding Model as detailed in the discussion paper. Moving that way, Councillor Henderson, and seconding that, Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, ma'am. I read through this and also remind members that coming up in another 100 pages or so is the a parallel kind of arrangement with regard to and a national level coastal councils program. This is to me, when I look through it, what is it? You know, what can we get out of it? Really, is it just another talk shop? Is it just another collection of councils, you know, cheerleading around a particular issue, or has it got some substance in it? And I'm sorry to say that, you know, I just think that it doesn't stack up. It's an alliance. It's not part of, as the Coastal Council's program is further on. It's just an alliance. You know, we're being asked to pay $2,000. Well, I'm all in on paying for something that's worthwhile, but what is this alliance going to do? To me, not much. And you know, as usual, they dress things up by saying they're going to, you know, provide leadership, support and advocacy, always trying to do too much with no money and no real business plan to provide anything. To me, just another group of another grouping for councils to hang out in, and it's not going to have, you know, any impact at all, I don't think. We should be focusing on the, you know, the Australian Council Coastals Alliance. At least that's got a formal backing. But even they couldn't hold their last meeting because they couldn't get a quorum. This is the whole business of council of conservation of our marine shoreline, etc., is a huge task involving billions of dollars, not just a few million, billions of dollars. And you've got to have serious organisations that be coming up to make a difference. And to me, I won't be voting for this because I just believe it's there's no substance to it. Yeah, it will be a talk fest around some meetings, starting from an extremely low base. It's just an informal gathering of councils. We are better to be putting our effort and funds into the Australian Coastal Councils and hope and pray that they manage to get sufficient interest to have quorums and get something done.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Is there any further discussion on this? No, that's fine. One of the things that I will say in relation to the South Australian Coastal Council Alliance is that it is related specifically to South Australian coasts rather than the broader alliance, which looks at coastal councils throughout Australia, and so being able to advocate for South Australian coastal councils around sea change issues, around weather pattern issues, and advocate and lobby to the state government, which can get lost in the wider coastal councils, can happen through this measure. If Councillor
I'll just ask a question because I do agree with Councillor Robertson. My question is, which group would we be better being a part of, or should we be a part of both? I struggle with these because I don't believe that the council receives a lot from them. I haven't seen a lot of evidence of that, let's put it that way.
You can answer that one.
Through the Mayor, with regards to the South Australian Coastal Councils Alliance, I'm unable to answer that because it is only newly formed. The Australian Coastal Councils does look at national issues, and not all councils who are coastal councils are members of the Australian Coastal Council Alliance. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, I'm looking at Kathy at the back of the room there, but I think it's only about 5 of the councils that have coastal councils are members of the Australian Coastal Council Alliance. It's not all of South Australian councils. The idea of establishing this group was actually to have more impact and collectively work together on trying to address coastal issues. So that's why it was formed, because we haven't had a collaborative, coordinated approach to addressing those matters. To be honest, for a $2,000 spend initially to ascertain whether it is a benefit to council or not, it's not a lot to spend. Not every council has the capacity or resources to undertake some of the research this group is supposed to be looking at. So it's too early to say whether it's going to be a benefit or not, or whether you need to be members of both. I mean, one obviously looks at federally in terms of support from the federal government. The other is predominantly around South Australian, although they will do some federal approach. Because it's not consistent as to every council has different responsibilities of its coastal areas as well, and it's trying to provide some consistency of that.
Councillor Hales, you wanted to say something, and then Councillor Kemp.
Some more information around that is that the South Australian Coastal Councils Alliance and the Australian Coastal Councils Association are in the process of establishing a memorandum of understanding between the two organisations, so that they can, I guess, play their strengths, one federally, one at a state level, and not tread on each other's toes, but rather enhance and use, I guess, not recreate the wheel both times. They'll use each other's research, each other's information in order to get the best results at either a state or a federal level.
Councillor Kemp.
Thanks, Ms Jenkins. I find it interesting that the LGA Research and Development Scheme is 2018-19 was $100,000. Then they dropped it down to 35 for project based only, and now it's going to be advised as whether they will or not continue for the next 3 years. So to me, this looks at they're trying to raise another $70,000 by placing $2,000 per council. So yes, 2,000 doesn't sound much, but you know the point is I'm just not quite sure whether because of the LGA have done something and reasons why. It'd be interesting to find out their reasons why they pulled the pin on this alliance and not fund it to a degree. It'd be interesting. But yeah, I'm not quite sure if I'll support this because at the moment, these types of things grow. They start little and they get bigger and bigger, like every other association that councils are involved in, always coming back every year for more and more funds because of new developments, new ideas, new concepts, executive officer positions, etc. It's a growing, just grows, but I won't be supporting it.
Just through the Mayor, sorry, Councillor Kemp, just to clarify, the research and development scheme was originally provided funding to establish the coastal councils. It was never about an ongoing funding support for it because it was seen as additional association as such. And the LGA has actually just reviewed all of its funding models for Sutherland Hills LGA. All the other LGAs have had a review as well.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate? No, in that case then I'll put recommendation 2 to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you.
Oh, division, please, Mayor.
All those in favour, please stand. Just wait for Pauline to catch up. Councillor Mann. Councillor Hales. Councillor Littling. Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Schofield. Councillor Henderson. Those against? Councillor Charles. Councillor Robertson. That motion is lost. Carried. Thank you. We now move to recommendation 3, that council include an allowance of $2,000 in the 21-22 operating budget for membership to the South Australian Coastal Council Alliance, should the funding model be adopted. Moved by Councillor Henderson and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to that? Councillor Glasbrook.
I will support it because I supported the first one, but I really think we need to look at this closely next time and with the national one, because if there is no value in it, we should pull out before it does get out of proportion.
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, until the water's lapping at Parliament House, the federal and the state governments aren't going to do anything, and that's what we're waiting for. So we're probably just wasting money now, you know, until the emergency comes, and then they'll put the money into it, and that's what we're waiting for. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Any further discussion? I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. We now move, it is 8 o'clock, so we have 10 minutes break, 10-minute break. Is everyone happy for that? Yes? Beautiful. I'll see you at 8:10. Thank you very much. Who are we waiting for? Councillor Hale, is Councillor Hales behind you, Graham? I'll just wait for, give him a minute. All right, enough frivolity. All right, welcome back, everybody. I think everybody is here. We're now up to 12.2, the Encounter Lakes Urgent Pump Repair Works. And I might do that recommendation on block as well, unless anybody has any objections to that. So somebody would like to move that recommendation on block. Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconded by Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
First, I'll just ask a question compared to why are we repairing this pump instead of replacing it? Because I would imagine this pump's been fairly old, and it's really depending on costs. Because under capital, you could replace it with a brand new under capital and not impact our operating budget as much. So I'm just wondering whether the administration could provide the answer as to why we're going for repairs compared to the capital. Then I'll speak to it.
Karen, thank you.
Through the chair, it's been determined that refurbishment is probably the best way forward, but we will do a cost analysis, and if we do determine that it should be replaced, we'll consider that, whatever is the most cost effective.
Thank you. I think it's important that we maintain the lakes and their conditions, and with this pump it is very important that we do that. The tidal system with the main lake is a tidal system with controls of gates, but the control system for the Franklin Island development is all through pump systems. And it's pumped water in, pumps out, and it needs a lot of pumping to turn the water over to keep it, consistent for testing purposes, but also clarity and to make it look nice. So the residents at the moment are not over happy about the condition of the Franklin Island waterway because it is dirty, mucky, and there is some development around there in Harbourview Terrace, we understand that. But this pump's been, that's why it's been critical that these pumps are maintained at a high level to really exchange that water of that lake on a regular basis. So do support this, and I think it'd be nice to get a brand new pump, that way we start afresh and not having to keep repairing and replacing old parts, which really I think in the end most really a new one would be a much better option if the price is right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And yes, Councillor Kemp, myself and Karen Rokoczynski have both been in touch with several of the neighbours on Franklin Island and talked to them in relation to their concerns about the water quality. Just to echo what Councillor Kemp said in terms of the building site across the road, whenever it rains, that just spreads mud into the lake. And on the hot northerly wind days, you can see that wind blowing up and that dust settling on the lake, which is contributing to the turbidity of the lake. There's also work going to be done. I think, Karen, you may be able to tell me whether I'm right. The pipes that actually pump the water out are full of mussels at the moment, and there's work going to be done on clearing the mussels from that pipe, so that when the flushing occurs through the pump works, and if the council says the pump can be repaired, then it's able to flush more clearly. Is that correct?
Through the chair, it would make it a more efficient pumping process because there'd be greater capacity within the pipe, having the mussels removed. That's scheduled to occur before the end of March, subject to weather and a few other variables.
Thank you. Does it, Councillor Little, you want to speak to this?
I will, just saying with regards to the quality of the water in the Franklin Island area, it was known 30 years ago when those lakes were made, that the length of the tidal flow pipe and the diameter of the tidal flow pipe was half of what was initially planned, and therefore any extension to the lake was always going to put pressure on the water system there. The high school was monitoring that lake 30 years ago, and that was identified then that this would be an ongoing problem. It seemed to be, we may have got played back then by the developers who had visions of opening that Franklin Island Lake eventually out into the Inman River. So that's an explanation as to why it's not of a standard that it can't have a full tidal flushing system, because the pipes were never made big enough.
If you look at aerial images currently of the lake and Encounter Lakes, the Franklin Island Lake and Encounter Lakes, side by side, you can see quite significant differences in the look of the water, with Encounter Lakes looking quite bluey green and the Franklin Island Lakes from the aerial images looking quite brown. So there is quite a significant difference then. Does anybody else want to speak to this, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, briefly, Mayor. Question to, I guess, to Director Wakatinsi. Yeah, the council has to honour this agreement that was made. The lake's water needs to be kept up to scratch. But I guess at present, the council is responsible for the cleaning out of the mussels out of the pipes, the repair of the pumps, and all these list of 5 actions that's on page 116. Do we also pay for the electricity of the pump that the pumps use?
Through the chair, yes, that is a cost to the council to keep all of these things functioning and operational, so that we can meet the requirements of the Encounter Lakes and Franklin Island Management Plan.
Okay, so here's my statement on this process. I go back to what Councillor Kemp was referring to earlier. Not just should we repair this pump or should we replace it, but are we sure that whatever money we spend, that we have the latest and most efficient technology being applied? It's an electric pump, but there are other sorts of pumps that we could have if we're going to spend money on the pump itself. And then, with respect to the electricity bill, I'm sure that down there, in amongst that, all the people who live on those lakes, there's plenty of spare electricity coming out of their solar panels. So would it be possible to hook up a virtual power network from out of the residents' spare electricity generation that we could put into powering whatever device we have to keep the water moving? So that's my both a statement and a question, and that is it worthwhile doing a check that we it's not just a matter of repairing this existing pump, but should we get a better one? The question Councillor Littley raised, you know, at some point, should we be digging up the pipe and replacing it with another one, bigger one? But the other one is, could we get the virtual power network going down there to have at least the council's costs in terms of electricity?
Director Robertsinski, would you respond to that?
Certainly. Through the chair, the pump has been sized and designed to meet water quality requirements as per the Encounter Lakes and Franklin Island Management Plan. It's been selected to be the most efficient in meeting those needs, and it has, we've always been able to maintain water quality, get it back to anything within the acceptable parameters within the management plan. We'll certainly look at whether the repair versus a replacement would be the most efficient option, although I'm sure Jody has already looked into that somewhat. As for the power generation, I'm sure those residents probably like the benefits of putting that energy back into the grid financially, but anything further than that, it would be quite an extensive consultation process. If that's a project Council wanted us to embark upon, I'd probably need a resolution with some with a budget allocation to support that. It's a relatively significant undertaking.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that? Councillor Schofield, did you want to close the debate? No. In that case, then I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? So that's carried unanimously. Thank you. We now come to 12.3, Victor Dragons Incorporated proposed lease and funding agreement. There are 4 items in this recommendation. If you're happy for me to do them on block. Councillor Lidley moving that way and Councillor Henderson seconding that. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Lidley?
Very briefly, I understand the positioning of this. Well, can I understand that the positioning of the facility, the shed, has got some leeway to be moved onto that site, given the fact that there are there's a number of projects or discussions happening with other clubs in there. Is there is the lease big enough that it can have a little bit of movement either way? Is that, or is it just the site of the shed, the size of the shed that would make up this lease?
Through the chair, it's ultimately just the shed area with a bit of land access for them to be able to do washdown of the vessels as well. But the placement was as per their request. It hasn't been worked through specifically with the Encounter Bay recreation groups. But yes, there's been discussion, but not.
So where it sits precisely on that space isn't absolutely finalised.
We would be consulting on that location that the Dragon Boat Group have requested.
Excellent.
Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I think this group of people have been looking for a more appropriate and more permanent place to store their dragon boats for a very long time. And I really do think it's time this moved forward and gives them some peace of mind as to what their future is.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And Councillor Kemp, just before I come to you, I just noted that there is somebody from the Dragon Boats in the gallery, and I do apologise if I'd realised that you were here earlier on and I'd seen you. I would have tried to get this item moved forward. You've been here for a long time. Thank you for your patience. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I do have a query around the amount of money that's been now in the report. When we had a deputation from Les Sharp, who did a great presentation in the last council meeting. He spoke to the financial development of the site. The initial estimate of the cost of this project is $60,000. The project will be funded as follows: club contribution $20,000, grant funding $25,000, council assistance $10,000, which may either be cash amount, in-kind amount, or a combination of both. Other assistance from business and services groups of $5,000. So that's what was presented in the deputation, because here in the document is what he spoke to. Now it's changed to 25,000 with 20,000 cash and 5,000 there. So if we can have an explanation as to the changes and how it became a change from deputation to this document now.
I'm not actually certain, I'm afraid.
We'll have to take that on notice, Councillor Kemp.
Well, then I move a motion to adjourn this item until we get the answers.
Mayor, if you would accept that the Dragon Boat people might like to...
Point of order.
Sorry,
I've moved a motion of adjournment.
Yep, sorry, Chief Charles, Councillor Kemp's quite correct. Yep. So do I have a seconder for Councillor Kemp's motion? Councillor Hales. All those in favour?
If you're going to move a formal motion to adjourn it, I need what you're adjourning for and to when.
The reason why I'm adjourning this motion is that inconsistency in the report needs to be clarified exactly what the amount is and the reasons for, and bring it back to the April council meeting, which is a month's time, which is not that long, and it won't interfere with the 21-22 budget process or the public consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I do actually have some information that's just been given to me if you would like me to explain that, or you're happy to keep continuing with your formal motion, because I think the information is here. On page 133 of the agenda, in the submission, it actually says that a council contribution 25,000 made up of 20,000 cash and 5,000 in kind was actually requested by the club. On page 133.
Again, that's under the lease arrangement, that document on attachment B. So again, it's not what the deputation presented. So what was written in the report is reflected in the lease arrangement, which is a natural process to do, but the deputation had a different figure. So I just want to get clarity around it as to why it's changed.
This is the letter from Les Sharp, President of the Victor Dragons. And under funding, based on expected costs, we would hope that funding could be on the following basis. Council contribution $25,000 made up of $2,000 cash and $20,000 cash and $5,000 in kind works. Under the heading of funding.
Just clarification, what you're reading out there is whereabouts that is attachment A, is it?
It's on page 133.
They provide an attachment A and
B.
attachment B. This is an attachment A.
This is attachment B.
Through the Mayor, attachment B is the proposal that the Dragon Boats have put to us that we're putting to council. And attachment A is an earlier proposal. I'm not certain what's changed, perhaps firmer costings, but the proposal is for the $25,000 at attachment B.
So we do have a formal motion on the floor, and we were voting on that. I think we need to finish that and either adjourn this to a particular time, which you were going to clarify, Councillor Kemp, or continue on with the recommendation. So did you clarify the particular time, Councillor Kemp, that you wanted this adjourned for?
Yes, for
the
next
April council meeting, sorry.
The next council meeting.
Yep, thank you. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is lost. We go back to the original recommendation. And does anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Kemp, you can no longer speak to it because you moved the motion, and same with Councillor Charles. Is that right? Oh, you can go back to this one. I beg your pardon. Any discussion, Councillor Glasbrook?
Yes, thank you. Well, I will support this because I understand that these people have been waiting for years and years and years, like many of our sporting groups. But I will just say that I've got significant concerns about this location. I'm not 100% sure this is the right spot for them, to be honest. But whether we can come up with something better in the very short term, I'm not sure. So I will vote for this, but as I say, I'm not sure we're doing the right thing.
You're not going to ask for trial, are you, Councillor Glasbrook?
No, I don't want to trial.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Kemp.
I'll just make a request, thanks Mayor Jenkins, that you know, for clarity of reports, we actually identify the process or what's the arguments are, because it is confusing between attachment A and attachment B as to one's a request from the Victor Dragon people boats, but also the other one is the Victor Dragon proposed release of land. So I'm just wondering, for future reference, if we get a little bit more clarity around what the attachments are, what's for, what's not, and that, just for a little bit of ease of reading.
Thank you, councillor Kemp. I'll put the motion on block. Sorry, councillor Lidley. Oh, you want to close the debate? Yes.
I would like to close the debate. I might try to reassure councillor Glazebrook that this has been discussed with all clubs in that Encounter Bay precinct. And I hope that, all I'll say is I hope that councillors support this and we can welcome the dragon boats into that precinct, because fundamentally we agree on, it might be a slightly tweak of orientation, but the location and having that valued community sporting group in our precinct would be fantastic. So please support it.
Thank you, councillor Lidley. I will now put the recommendation on block. All those in favour and those against? That's carried unanimously. Congratulations to the Victor Harbour Dragons. And I know that this has been something that you've been working for a very long time, a home for your boats. We now move to item 13.1, Fleurieu Regional Community Services Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Would someone like to move that we receive and note those? Thank you, councillor Henderson, and seconded by councillor Schofield. Either of you like to speak to them? Anyone like to speak to them? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you, unanimously. The Southern Community Transport Scheme Advisory Committee minutes. Would someone like to move that they're accepted? Councillor Henderson, and seconded by? Please, seconded by? Thank you, councillor Mann. Either of you want to speak to them? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. The Special Audit Committee minutes for the 1st of March. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Glazebrook, and seconded by councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to them? Councillor Glazebrook.
Yes, thank you. I would just quickly like to just read out the points there at number 2, because I think it's critically important that council takes note of this. And that is that the Audit Committee provide the following feedback to council. Council needs to clarify its appetite for borrowings, which is very important in my opinion. Rate increase scenarios need to be modelled and considered. Again, is also very important to do when we make decisions. The sensitivity effect of potential interest rate increases need to be considered. And that's also obviously incredibly important. On that, people say, oh, interest rates are low. But, you know, we're talking at, you know, a 10-year period. I can just about guarantee you that in 10 years' time we won't be paying 1 or 2%. So, and of course, the key financial indicators that the Audit Committee have recommended is that our asset renewal funding ratio should be 100% on a rolling 3-year average, which is critical. That's maintaining our assets. The net financial liabilities should have a maximum target of 100%. So we do have a bit of leniency there if we wish to choose something different, but certainly the maximum they suggest is 100%. And our operating surplus is -2 to 2% with a rolling 3-year average of 0. It's a very crucial little piece of information there, and I'd like members to make sure that they keep that in mind over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Glazebrook. And yes, I think that it's really important to take into account what the audit committee say. And I would encourage members, even those who are not on the audit committee, to come in and sit in and listen to the audit committee. You'll all have opportunities to ask questions if there's anything that you don't understand. But the financial viability of the council and of our projects is extremely important. So if you can come in, meet the independent members and ask questions, please do so. Councillor Kemp, you want to say something?
Thanks, Mayor Jenkins. Just a question to the administration, to the CEO. The first 3 dot points that Councillor Glazebrook read out. Council needs to clarify its appetite for borrowing, modelling on rate increases and potential interest rate increases. Would there be a report provided back to the chamber on those 3 items? at some stage, to give us some clarity around what the audit committee is expecting, so we can get an understanding of what we're looking for, especially as we move towards our next budget workshop. It'd be good to get some ideas around that. I know there'll be some modelling done on amounts of rates we may be raising to see what it looks like in the way of surplus and deficits, etc. I was just wondering, is there a timeline for these three dot points to be answered?
Kelly, you answer that?
Thank you, through the Mayor. So we are planning on an additional workshop in regards to the asset management plans and the long-term financial plan. So if it hasn't already, I believe it would be in your diaries for the 29th of March. And we'll be presenting the draft long-term financial plan, which will actually deal with each of those issues and provide some rate modelling. Going through the three items, we'll be looking at the borrowings and what that looks like. I guess the appetite for your borrowings is set by your net financial liabilities ratio in some ways, because that is essentially a ratio that measures that. The rate increase scenarios will be providing some scenarios around what happens if you increase your rates by more than is currently in the plan and what's the impact of that. And also there'll be a section in there on the sensitivity of interest rate increases as well. So we'll be presenting all of that back with the draft long-term financial plan for you to have a look at a workshop before coming to council for public consultation.
Thank you, Kelly. That answer your question, David?
Yes, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments on this? In that case, I'll put the recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Recreation Centre Management Committee meeting minutes. Would someone like to move? Thank you very much, Councillor Mann, and seconded by Councillor Hales. Either of you want to speak to those? Anyone want to speak to those? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to ask a question of Councillor Mann, if I could, about the minutes. Been tracking this committee for a little while, and this particular meeting was 13 minutes long. I think in the past, it seems Councillor Lidley would be really impressed with this particular committee, because often their meetings don't go for more than half an hour or so. In fact, I don't know if there's ever been one going
Can I have a
for
point of
an
order
hour.
as to what that actually means?
Hmm?
Can I request a point of order as what that means, as far as citing me and saying I'd be really impressed with a meeting running for 13 minutes?
Yeah,
because
yeah, I accept your point of order, Councillor Lidley. Councillor Robertson, you're moving into sort of innuendos, and that's probably not professional to do. If you can just keep to the particular point and the question that you have to Councillor Mann, that would be appreciated.
Okay, I'll come to the other issue in a minute. This particular recreation centre, as far as I'm aware, has quite a number of issues, but this committee meets, over really short time frames. I don't know to what extent, because our minutes don't, give us very much information about what was done, but a committee meeting about that centre lasting for 13 minutes, this is not unusual. I think there's been one that lasted 10 minutes. So, I mean, what's going on here is that there really isn't any issues at all about the recreation centre, that the action list is close to zero. What's happening?
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Robertson, for the question. And I take your note about the meeting time, and I do apologise. This was a particularly long meeting for the recreation centre. The reason why the meetings are so short and that you have all these regular meetings is that unlike a lot of our other advisory groups or committees, or excuse my terminology, this one we're required to have this meeting due to the leaseholding arrangement with the different groups within there. So it's a required meeting of council with these groups. That's why we have to have it. A lot of the time it is quite quick, because I guess you're saying about issues, and without citing, you mentioned about there's lots of issues without citing which ones, but usually in the past we've worked through different the different agenda items, and usually it's all, there hasn't been as many issues arising as I guess what you were inferring. Everyone seems to get along quite well. The administration do an absolutely incredible job at managing these different leasing groups and the running and management of the centre. So I guess that's why there isn't as much coming up in these, because it is excellently done by staff and in the background, and it doesn't take as much time at this sort of committee level. So I guess if that addresses that one, but yeah, it's probably something that you wouldn't need to have these regular meetings or these short meetings, and they could just happen less when there were these more significant matters, I guess, that you're inferring, or if some were to come up. But because of we're required under the legislation to have those meetings and the arrangements, that's why we have to have them, and that's why they only go for 13 odd minutes. So I don't know if that completely addresses your question, and I'm sure if the CEO has anything to add, she may, but hopefully that's all right.
Can I just add something, Councillor Mann? I see present, there was yourself and Councillor Hales, but there was really only 2 of the leaseholders present at the last meeting, with the other leaseholders being apologies to the meeting. So you had 3 council staff plus 2 elected members and 2 leaseholders. So I imagine that you've gone through any issues that arose pretty quickly. Councillor Robertson, did you have another question?
No, Mayor. It's just that this year in our budget and proposed for next year's budget, we have a lot of issues, a lot of money coming up. We're associated with a lot of issues normally with regard to a centre of this size and complexity with the number of people that are in there. And if this is the conduit between if this committee is the conduit between the council and the leaseholders in there, it's congratulations to the committee. It's really efficient. But to me, are we really working through a substantive agenda? I don't know. The minutes don't give any clues.
So congratulations to a very efficient committee. Thank you. Councillor Glasbrook, you've got a question, or you've got something to say?
Yes, a question. My question is to the CEO. Is there any way that we could efficiently change that part of the lease without having to go through an in-depth legal process? Because that seems to be horribly inefficient. So surely we could do something about that.
I'm happy to take that on notice and have a look. Yeah, I need to look at the detail of each of the leases. So there are complex leases in regards to who has access to the facility. I'll take it on notice.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll put that recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Subsidiary and representative reports. The recommendation is that Councillor receive and note them. Moving that way, Councillor Hales, and seconding that, Councillor Robertson.
I have a question, Mayor.
You can speak to it, Councillor Robertson, if you'd like to.
No, I have a separate question. Before this, you were looking at your notes before announcing this item on the agenda. Can I ask a question?
Is your question related to the representative reports?
No.
Well, you can't ask a question about the previous.
No, I wasn't asking a question about the previous one at all. I wanted to ask a question of Councillor Littley, if I might. Would that be okay, Mayor?
No, not unless it's about the representative reports and the recommendation that Councillor Hales has just moved and you've just seconded.
Okay.
Would you like to would you like to speak, Councillor Hales? Do you want to speak to this recommendation? No. Councillor Robertson, would you like to speak to the recommendation?
I have some questions about the reports, Mayor. Yeah.
Well, you can do that. You seconded the motion, so you can speak to it.
Okay.
You want to put your microphone on first? Councillor Robertson.
No, okay, I'll leave it at present.
Does anybody want to speak?
Sorry, no, I had
Please,
about...
Councillor Robertson. Do you have a question or do you want to speak to the motion?
No, I want to speak to the motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to highlight and thank the council for including on page 218 the high school's annual report for 2020. This is a large organisation, and I would commend to the members here that this is well worthwhile reading. The high school has done a great job in 2020. It's been a very tough year for them in terms of the COVID issue, but also particularly in terms of one of their biggest concerns at present, which is attendance rates at the school, and but also increasing trend in the school about suspensions of students for violence. But it's also, I think, worth reading from the point of view of council, in the sense that out of the leavers from the 2020 cohort, that 41% of those, their intentions were not known in terms of what they wanted to do. We know that the employment market is not good for them at present, neither is the study market. And that once they leave school, of course, then they become part of the adult population of Victor. They move from being so-called, well, being looked after by the schools out into the youth of the town, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from the schools in terms of what happens to those youth, particularly this year, when many of them will not be able to leave for Adelaide or elsewhere to look for work or other opportunities, and that we have very little going on in terms of our youth programs at present. So I commend the annual report for people to look at.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else want to speak? Councillor Charles?
Yes, I read through the report which was emailed to us, and it was very informative, and it was also concerning to see how many students are on supported school card and so on. A rather large number, and probably more, not probably more, but more at the primary school. So we do have a very large proportion of parents who can't afford to pay fees. So it's a concerning thing.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Is there any more discussion in relation to the representative reports? Not, I'll put that motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority's second budget review and December performance review, performance report. I'll take those recommendations en bloc. Move that way, Councillor Glasbrook, and second, Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that?
No, I'll ask any questions. I think it's pretty self-explanatory and a fairly good result.
Thank you. Councillor Schofield? No. Anybody want to speak to that or have any questions? In that case, I'll put the recommendations to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 14.3, the draft Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority Charter. And I will do this recommendation separately. The first one is that Council receive and note the Charter report. So I'd like to move that way. Councillor Charles moving that way and seconding Councillor Glasbrook. Thank you. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The second recommendation, is that council approve the revised draft Fleurieu Waste Authority Charter 2021 as provided attachment B. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to it? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm fully opposed to this Waste Authority proposed charter on attachment B. There are several items in there that I think are really on the nose, but the worst one is the clause that in relation to having all clause 5.5, which is that this group wants to have all of their meetings, their agendas, the meetings themselves, the minutes, all being in confidence. That's their default position, that's what they want. And to me, this is terrible. And I don't care if the Southern Regional Waste Authority does this sort of thing, that's their business. But to me, as a council, we have this mantra of being an organisation that wants to be open to our public. We want to educate them, that we want to be having good governance and so forth. People who want to operate in secret shouldn't be allowed to be put onto as independents onto these boards, because that's not how our elected members or our staff who are representatives on these boards think. How are we supposed to be an open council, if we have subsidiaries that think that it's okay to do everything in confidence? Are they not clever enough, these people, to be able to manage their business so that their default mode is that they're open to the public, and where it is they need to be for some truly commercial reason and not some on-block arrangement where they need to be in confidence? They want the public to come on board with, we want the public to come on board with what goes on in an authority which is doing a great job of reducing waste to landfill, which is doing a great job of recycling and so on. But how do you get the confidence of a public whose board members operate in total secrecy? To me, it's a shocking indictment on this group. But I note that in the dissenting voices, in terms of that voted against this, when it came up at the board level, that Councillor Glazebrook and Director Rogoczynski voted against this. In other words, this charter would go forward with this secrecy element in it. To me, it's pathetic that they can't manage their affairs, so that if they truly have something in confidence they need to put forward, they can't use redaction, they can't use other means to keep what they have to keep in confidence, but that they embrace the public, the people that pay their board fees, the people that are depending on this authority to be operating effectively.
Councillor Andrews, one of the things that is possible for you to do, or for the chamber to do, is to, if this recommendation 2 is not carried, to suggest an alternative recommendation that actually addresses those concerns of yours. But I'll leave that for somebody in the chamber to do that if they so wish. Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to that? Councillor Glazebrook?
Yes, I will speak. As Councillor Robinson said, I do disagree with the majority of the board members on this particular decision. It's not at all a reflection on the board. As you all know, I speak highly of the Waste Authority. I think they're doing a good job, as best they can do within the confines that they operate, and I support them. it is more, for me, principle of this confidence. I don't believe that the Local Government Act supports confidence. The Local Government Act is very, very much in favour of being open and transparent, and I believe it should be the same for the Waste Authority. I think it's exactly totally the opposite to what currently in place, where the meetings are open, and if there's a issue or a contract or more of a business dealing, they go into confidence, as we do in council, and that has worked very well. And so I don't really believe that we need to go this way. So, as I say, it's more of a principle thing to me. I believe if we allow this, it's just another little chip away at more and more and more things going into confidence, and it's not personally what I believe the Act specifies, and it's not the way that I want local government to go. So, therefore, I've been speaking against it and don't agree with it. So, I also foreshadow that if this motion is lost, I do have an alternative motion that I'd have to move.
Thank you, Councillor Glazebrook. Is there any other? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Again, majority of this charter reads quite well, but there are elements in there which really, in my mind, goes against the intent of the Act and how councils form subsidiaries and how these subsidiaries will perform. And I think we've got to be very mindful as a council that we don't allow subsidiaries to set precedents for other subsidiaries to follow. And all of a sudden, our community is saying what's going on because everything's in confidence and we don't know what's been decided. Yet they work on behalf of the councils. So I certainly won't be supporting as it is in its current form. I believe that there are some elements in there which should be changed, and hopefully that may be the opportunity. But at the moment, I think the intent of the Act, and I guess the issues around here is also because if we have to be prescriptive in this area, say under a Section 43 subsidiary and what they can and can't do, I mean, the Act would be 1,000 pages long, if you start getting prescriptive. And of course, being prescriptive means that you may miss something and that may be detrimental. So I think the intent of the Act is taking good faith that the subsidiary will follow the guidelines of the Act and follow it, within those frameworks. So I think this charter does not do that in some elements. So that's why I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I see this slightly differently to some of my other elected members in the chamber tonight. This is a business entity. They're trying to run a successful business. There wouldn't be a business in this country that didn't have the ability to discuss their business plans and their initiatives and their new ideas in confidence. Any decisions made would then be made public. So it's not as if they're doing things in secrecy. The results of their decisions will be made public at some point. But to have the free flow of discussion about business ideas, new initiatives, etc., it is, in my opinion, quite necessary to have those discussions with any conditions of basically watching what's said and being careful about what's said, while those ideas may be fresh and new and not wishing to share them with other similar businesses.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. That closes debate. I'll now put that recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That recommendation is lost. Councillor Glazebrook, you foreshadowed an alternative recommendation.
Yes, thank you. So I believe the administration hopefully have a copy of this. So I'd like to move that Council endorse the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority Charter as provided attachment B with the following amendments. That clause 5.5, specifically 5.5.4, Notice of meetings of the board must be given by the executive officer in a manner determined by the board. The agenda and all supporting reports and documents will be available for public inspection unless the board otherwise determines. 5.5.5, Chapter 6, Part 3 of the Act does apply to the authority. Meetings of the board will be open to the public unless the board otherwise resolves. 5.5.6, that the minutes of all board meetings will be available for public inspection unless otherwise resolved by the board.
Councillor Glasbrook. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Glasbrook?
No, I think I've spoken enough. As I say, it's about transparency. It is a local government subsidiary. It's not necessarily a business, it's owned by the community. Same as council is, the community pays predominantly, well, certainly 90% of their funds. They do have some user charges and whatever else, and yes, they are endeavouring to try and increase their own source revenue. But as I've mentioned, and as we do ourselves, if some of those items are confidential, then there's no reason why they can't move into confidence, the same as this council does now. So I think that's all I need to say.
Thank you.
Mayor, would you read that again for us, please? And moving into confidence, so long as it does it stipulate there or anywhere, does it suggest that we go with section 90? I know the Act is mentioned. Can I just try
to do that, Councillor Charles? I just need to ask Councillor Robertson, who seconded the motion, if he wants to speak, and then I'll open up the floor for questions and discussion. Councillor Robertson.
Yes, briefly, Mayor. I do. I accept what Councillor Glasbrook has proposed there. I wish that we wouldn't be doing things like having minutes of meetings to be, since what's inside the minutes of most of our meetings say very little, except for what is recommendations. That they would not be ever in confidence, as I don't think our the minutes that we have here in council are ever in confidence. But anyway, it is what it is. But it's definitely a bad news thing to have subsidiaries reckoning that they can go ahead and have the entire meeting and or even any parts of it.
Councillor Charles, you wanted to speak? You had a question?
Yeah, I can't read what's up there and I wanted it to be read again, and an explanation given or an assurance given that the section 90 will be used, that they won't just go into conference because the board resolves to do so, that they resolve according to the Act. And
so the clause, it says that clause 5.5, 5.5.4, notice of meetings of the board must be given by the executive officer in a manner determined by the board. The agenda and all supporting reports and documents will be available for public inspection unless the board otherwise determines. 5.5.5, Chapter 6, Part 3 of the Act does apply to the authority. Meetings of the board will be open to the public unless the board otherwise resolves. 5.5.6, the minutes of all board meetings will be available for public inspection unless otherwise resolved by the board. That the CEO can answer your more specific point of your question.
And Chapter 6, Part 3, Chapter 6 is Meetings of the Local Government Act, Part 3 is Section 90.
Thank you, I was going to ask that.
Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Kemp?
Thanks, Mayor Jenkins. No, I think this is a good way of moving forward to ensure that our subsidiaries do operate in an open manner for our community to see how they're operating on our behalf. There's one area there which I sort of was reading through earlier on, and it's about do we need to consider whether we allow the board to develop their own meeting procedures and not follow the standard meeting procedures of what most subsidiaries and councils do follow.
through the Mayor, the Charter already enables them to create their own code of practice for meeting procedures, as Council is allowed to, can't speak tonight, sorry. So they will, but it needs to be in accordance with their Charter and in accordance with the Act, but they can create their own meeting procedures.
Thank you.
Any further questions or commentary? Councillor Glasbrook, do you want to close the debate? I'll put this motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Uh, 15.1 is the mayoral report. The recommendations that Council receive and note the report for March. Move that way. Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconded by Councillor Lidley. Are there any questions? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. The elected member reports. The Council received and note the elected member reports. Someone move that way. Councillor Glasbrook, thank you, and Councillor Mann seconding that. Any questions? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. There are no matters of urgency. Questions on notice. 17.1, questions on notice, ratepayers, Councillor Peter Charles. I take that as noted and read. 17.2, questions on notice, McKinley Street Car Park, Councillor David Kemp. I take that as noted and read. Questions on notice, Council Member Continual Harassment of Staff, Crozey Hill Land Divisions, Councillor Kemp. I take that as read. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to ask a question of Councillor Lidley, if I might.
Certainly.
Councillor Lidley, today or yesterday you sent out an email saying that you'd be departing the chamber after 3 hours. That was 40 minutes ago. Do you intend to leave or are you staying?
I noticed that come through. That was a delayed response to the last council meeting that I had actually sent that out. I'm not sure why that bounced back through or why that came back through, because I understand that at the February meeting that did go through to all members and it was all received. So it was a glitch in the matrix, Councillor Robertson.
Any other questions about notice? Motions on notice. The first one is the rescission of motion OC714-2020. We've done that one. I beg your pardon. We don't do it again. Motion on notice, the statute amended LGA review bill from Councillor Robertson. Do you still want that motion on notice, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do.
All right, the first recommendation is that Council receive and note it. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. And seconding that is Councillor Hales. All those in favour? That's carried, thank you. Councillor Robertson, would you like to propose your motion?
Yes, Mayor, I would. The process here, I think the opportunity came up in terms of putting out a questionnaire to the councils about member behaviour, etc., framework, and foreshadowed in the previous meeting that what we really needed to do and what we were actually have to do in the end anyway is to go out and undertake public consultation. I don't believe that we've ever really asked our ratepayers before, and maybe we'll get no response, but we've never really asked them before what they expect in terms of council member behaviour. They are, after all, our most important sounding board, our own people. And I think if we do this we use the feedback form that was sought and tweak it a bit. Our communication staff do a good job of this. We could pick up some really good information out of our representatives. I did note at the time that what the LGA wanted from us was feedback due by the 9th of March. Well, I wasn't taking any notice of that date because obviously it wasn't going to be practical to be involved with it. And I would like to amend or vary this the second part of this motion to make it from the 31st of March through to the 12th of April for a cut-off, if that's possible. And I think that it would be well worthwhile. You notice in the commentary from the staff that in the middle, smack in the middle of page 326, that it's
Councillor Robertson, do you want to get a seconder for your motion before you start talking to it?
Yep. From the 31st of March to change that to the 12th of April because the 31st of March with Easter, etc. is going to be.
Would someone like to second that motion? Councillor Kemp, thank you. You can talk to your motion, Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I think that it would be really useful for us as a chamber to use this process that's going on to find out from our most important constituents, which is not the LGA, what it is that they expect from their members. I think this is an opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp?
Thanks, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I believe our community needs to have input into our behaviour. If they feel that we're not behaving very well, respectful to each other, we should be told by our community, because we are answerable to our community, and we should seek their input on our behaviour. If the feedback comes back that we're very well and they're very happy with us and what we're doing, that's a slap on the back. But if there are comments coming back about certain aspects, then we need to address that. And I think that's what we should be doing ourselves, not relying on the LGA to go through the government and to put out what we should be doing. I think we're answerable to our community. That's who we answer to. And I think we should give them an opportunity to give us some positive feedback or negative feedback, depending on how they perceive us.
Councillor Littling?
I believe that we get feedback from our community, or we should be getting feedback from our community ongoing, as we're out there in our community, working with them and listening to them and consulting with them and having them tell us to our faces individually how we're doing. And I know that I get that feedback often, and it's not all positive. It's not. We also get feedback, and we will also get feedback in November 2022, when we put our hands up to be voted for. They will give us that feedback as individuals there.
Thank you, Councillor Littling. Councillor Glassbrook?
I'm sorry, I won't be voting for this one either. It's not that I don't necessarily agree with you. I just believe this is more of an overarching, document. We will be having the opportunity for council's behavioural policy coming up, which will be going out to public consultation, and that'll be, more along the lines of what we decide, our policy should be, what our thoughts are about behaviour, and it comes along the lines of the email that you sent out recently, Councillor Andrews, in relation to elected members getting together and sorting things out themselves, and that's what will come out of our council's behavioural policy. So I think I'd rather just go out to public consultation the once, and I personally believe that that's going to be a more of a policy that the community will have a real strong input into, as well as us elected members, and hopefully we'll get a good result from that. So I won't be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Glassbrook. Councillor Charles?
Me neither, unfortunately. I think the time is not on our side. Is it 63 councils in South Australia or some other figure? Whatever it is, I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference whether we get a public opinion on this. It's not going to change this immense thing, the LGA. And I just made my mind up when I heard what Councillor Glasbrook said. Of course, we can have a survey on the next local one where we put our own policy together, and I think we can find some enlightening information from the public, given them plenty of time and plenty of information and the freedom to speak out.
Any further commentary on Councillor Robertson's motion? Councillor Robertson, do you want to close the debate?
Yes, Mayor, I think I've listened to what the other members have said, and yeah, I think I'll withdraw the motion.
Withdraw the motion. Now move to item 19.3, motion on notice and mayoral report. Councillor Charles. I might ask Deputy Mayor Schofield to take over on this item as it relates to me, and there is a perceived conflict of interest. I'll leave the room while this is debated.
Okay, the first 19.3.
Point of order, please. I believe Councillor Schofield has a perceived conflict of interest and should exercise to excuse herself from the chair, since she was a complainant of sexual harassment against me in previous code of conduct and may have an inability to remain unbiased and neutral. In addition, the Ombudsman's report found that Councillor Schofield had made misstatements against Ben Blatchford.
That is not a point of order. So the recommendation that we have at the moment is that Council receive and note the motion on notice, mayoral report, Councillor Peter Charles. Do I have somebody to move that recommendation? Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Howes. Did either of you want to comment on that? No? I'll put that motion to the floor. Okay. And against?
Against. Oh, okay.
I'll put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? Thank you. That motion's carried. 2. Councillor Peter Charles to propose his motion.
Thank you. It genuinely surprises me that the accompanying commentary provided by administration does not address or appear to speak to my actual motion. All references to Council's unreasonable compliant policy and Mr Blatchford are totally off topic, as it is reference to civil liability claims relating to Crozier Hill and the mutual liability scheme. Having been informed of my motion, appears to be statements made to the cloud and the issue and to this. Sorry, I'll just start that again. All references to Council's unreasonable compliant policy and Mr Blatchford are totally off topic, as is a reference to civil liability claims relating to Crozier Hill.
Councillor Charles, if you'd like to put your motion, then you'll be able to speak to it after.
Right, but the motion comes in just a couple more lines. I don't think that matters. Okay, that the council requests Mayor Jenkins to present a report at the April council meeting to specify or specifically address the following. 1. Please provide evidence to support your claim that constant questioning by myself amounts to harassment and not part of my oath of office to fulfil the duties of public office in the public interest. 2. You specifically claim that I am harassing staff or council staff, then please explain why this serious matter has not been raised with me personally. 3. You claim that this alleged harassment has taken place over several years with numerous staff members, so please explain how such serious charges have been allowed to continue without intervention. 4. Given that I have had frequent code of conducts against me, please provide evidence that your action of specifically naming me, Councillor Charles, in an email as a person continually harassing council staff on numerous occasions is not a deliberate act of victimisation.
Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Robertson.
Chair, I want to put a formal motion to put the motion. I feel that the motion is clear as it is presented and it does not need to be further discussed or debated in the chamber. I'm moving a formal motion to put the motion.
Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Henderson?
No, I did.
There is no debate with the motion. Sorry. We now vote for the formal motion, to put the motion.
All those in favour?
Having fun with this. All those in favour? And those against? The motion is carried. Now we will put the original motion.
Can I call a division on that motion?
Sorry, through the Deputy Mayor, my apologies, Councillor Kemp. It needs to be done at the time before the Chair moves to the second item. Sorry.
Okay, we need to put the original motion. Anyone putting the, Councillor Charles, are you putting your original? Okay. I put the original motion to the vote that was moved by Councillor Charles and seconded by Councillor Robertson. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost.
For the division.
All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Mann, Councillor Hales, Councillor Littley, Councillor Glasbrook, and Councillor Henderson. The motion is lost.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. We now move on to item 20, motions without notice. Are there any motions without notice? Item 21, confidential items, there are none, and therefore at 9:25 we close. Thank you very much, everybody.
We've seen democracy at its very best.